That's most definitely what's up.
Shout out to the chess club.
Okay, everyone. Welcome. Yeah, exactly, Luke. I'm just replaying Hellblade real quick during the pre-stream. That's funny. Okay, you got me with that one. That was funny. That was pretty funny. I'll give you that. quick replay. Just real quick. Just gotta work through it. Dude, so I said in my video, I was like, I don't know how you could possibly take longer than like 5.5 hours to get through Hellblade. The one exception would be photo mode. Photo mode would do it. And I also think if you were to like maybe oh wait, hold on. Did I just accidentally fix? I may have accidentally fixed it. Okay, sweet. Christian, thank you for becoming a member or re-upping your membership. Appreciate you. But anyway, I like photo mode would do it. I think also, so when you're playing, if you're holding down just forward, Senua will walk super slowly. If you hold down left bumper, she'll do a light jog to work through levels a little faster. And I did see some videos of people who were playing, and I swear to God, they weren't using the jog button. They were just slowly walking through the levels, which over the course of the 5.5 hour game, I think could realistically add like an hour. So I think that could do it. The other way is straight up, if you were really bad at combat, I think could get you there. And like, honestly, if you were looking in every nook and cranny for every hidden little like face in the rocks or things, maybe that could get you a little higher. But like, I just genuinely don't know how you could bloat your time to like 8 to 9 hours. Even the biggest like stands of the game are saying, yeah, it's like 7 hours. And that's like max. So I don't know how you get to like 8 to 9 hours. I really don't. I think you'd have to be counting like, yeah, I spend 45 minutes tweaking graphical settings and I'm counting that as playtime. It's like, man, I don't know. It's really frustrating. I said in the video, I feel like now I see why Microsoft wasn't marketing it super heavily. One, because any marketing of it would just spoil it, and you know, there wasn't enough to show. But for those of you who have played it and finished it, am I wrong in thinking that that game had one of the most underwhelming and shockingly terrible endings of any game you've played in a long time? Like, I was genuinely shocked. Because again, no spoilers in case you want to try it. But they basically set it up for this big encounter, and they keep telling you it's going to be this big encounter. And then it just doesn't happen. And they're like, yeah, but that's because the encounter was basically the friends we had along the way. And it's like, I get that you kind of came up with a narrative reason for it being different, but like, that doesn't make it fun, you know? It's the same problem I've described with like Death Stranding stuff, where it's like, you can explain why this thing is like, why there's no NPCs, for example. It's all just holograms, except for like 3 or 4 characters. Like, you can explain, well, it's because they don't want to be exposed to the timefall and the radiation or whatever, so they have to stay down in their bunkers, so they use holograms instead. I'm like, that is what we call an explanation. But when you're making a game, you get to make up the explanation. You get to decide what is and isn't the case. And they decided to make it less interesting by having it holograms. So like, yeah, there's a narrative reason for it. That doesn't mean that it's good, right? But people just don't get it, I guess. It's complete in its incompleteness. I was just genuinely shocked that the game was over when it was over. Because I seriously, and I'm not kidding, Jacob in chat, Jacob can back me up, because I texted him and I was like, I think I might have actually accidentally found like an ending that skips the last act. I feel like I accidentally ended the game early because it just ends so abruptly and out of nowhere. And I replayed the whole thing. Maybe that's how they got to 8 hours. Maybe like, yeah, the confusion people will feel will make them replay the end of the game. So we're counting that as total playtime. But like, if you're going to let me down slowly and try to be like, yeah, calm down, it's only 8 hours long. Okay, but be accurate, you know? Let me, hold on, the music was too loud. Very glad to be here for 2 months. Happy Wednesday. Thank you, Mr. Steel Yo Kill. Glad to have you, my friend. Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure to have you. How long was the first one? Like 7 hours. And honestly, there was more combat. There were more puzzles. But seriously, I think they heard the complaints and frustrations of people that were like annoyed at how repetitive the puzzles could get and how repetitive the combat could be. And so they just decided to take it out. And like, well, we'll just replace that with walking. So there's that. It's like, that's a solution. You don't like this thing? Good. It's gone. Problem solved.
David Bryant is now a member. Heart, heart, heart.
Heart, heart, heart indeed, my friend. Heart, heart, heart. Yeah, it would be like, it'd be like, oh, you don't like the, I'm trying to think of what an example would be in a like critically acclaimed game. It's like, okay, you don't like great swords in Elden Ring. Okay. Well, to fix that, we cut all of Kalen. And it's like, wait, no, that's not, that doesn't fix it. You're just cutting what? But that's how they fix it. That's how they do it. It was just really weird. Just, okay, cool. I guess technically you got rid of the thing, part of the thing at least. But then there's other stuff where I feel just like straight up, they were intentionally obtuse and they intentionally lacked clarity when talking about it. But seriously, like all over the place, we talked on Monday about the Order 1886 and how much this game was reminding me of the Order 1886. Straight up, this is the PS5 Xbox Series console generation Order 1886. It is a game with stunning graphical fidelity and barely anything else. It is way shorter than they were even trying to communicate. And while it's impressive, it also is just frankly not where I think it needs to be. It would serve a great purpose as like an included sort of Astro's Playroom tech demo to showcase what the console's possible or what it's capable of. So like they include it with the Series X, even if you don't have Game Pass, they could do that. And I think that would be a great way to do it. But even at 50, this is like aggressive, real aggressive. Trauma and Psychosis Simulator for 2 hours. Well, over 5 hours. Well, and it's like I said in the review, I was like, this might come as like a stunning revelation. One of the main selling points for Hellblade is that they have this binaural audio, right? So you put the headphones on and it sounds like you have voices in your head. Really cool. In the first game, they were meant to put you in the state of psychosis with Senua. It was very much an art piece, but it was very, very good and really interesting to experience. In this game, the gimmick has largely worn off. And so what you have are either, like you said in chat, backseat gaming voices that are like Fat Master said, it's kind of like Atreus in God of War Ragnarok, where it's like you pause for a second during a puzzle and they're like, you must go in and move the pillar, and oh, you must change the perspective, change the pillar. And it just, it's like, bro, chill. And when it's not backseat gaming, it is simulating psychosis. And this is like shocking, I'm sure. Psychosis is deeply, deeply unpleasant. It's not fun, okay? But that's why they do it, is because they want you to experience what it's like and to make you empathize with it and the people that actually struggle with it. Cool. But it's still unpleasant. It's something you won't want to experience if you can help it. It's cool, but it's not enjoyable. So, and I was looking forward to it, dude. So the game is like being a streamer. Deeply unpleasant? Yeah, exactly. Precisely. Yeah, what's better than playing a cool looking game with no substance? Playing a cool looking game with no substance while going psychotic. Oh, baby. Bing, bang, boom. Yeah. And here's the deal. At the end of the day, if you enjoy Hellblade 2 and you got it through Game Pass and everything, cool, more power to you. I found it bafflingly disappointing. So that's my stance. And you know, if you enjoyed it, cool, awesome, love it, good for you. But for me, it's just, it was not what it needed to be. You guys are saying something about Valve. News segment. Okay, you guys are saying there's rumors that Microsoft is going to buy out Valve. where did this actually come from? Where does anyone know in chat where the rumor actually came from? Because for one, I don't really buy it at the outset, just knee jerk. I don't know. It seems like the only thing I can find is from Dior, Capital Markets, Video Games, and Law on Twitter. And the source is a picture that is just of Gabe sitting on a couch with a Steam Deck. And it says, with approximately 80 billion CCE, Microsoft is preparing an offer of 16 billion for Valve. No stock, all cash. I was just inquiring about deadlock and if it would impact how much other companies would be going for Valve this summer. That number seems too high to be leaked. That should pump Microsoft in any way. I think this is true. Plus, the analyst isn't even allowed to own Microsoft. Does anyone know? Is it an actual analyst? Let's see. I mean, this goes back to something in a leaked email. This goes back to like late 2023. Microsoft would buy Valve, quote, if opportunity arises, said Phil Spencer in leaked email. If the opportunity arises.
The Nerdeye Giant donated $4.99 through Super Chat.
Thank you.
Do you think we will get the announcement today for the PlayStation Showcase?
Probably not on Wednesday. Well, it's probably about a week out. I would guess if they're going to announce it, it's like a tweet on Friday, but what do I know? I will say, like, we're all suspicious of some reveal, but like I haven't heard anything or seen anything. You know, normally when there's something, they might start to send out feelers or hook up with content creators to get them prepared to cover it and stuff. I haven't heard or seen anything, so I don't really know if there's much to work with there. Could be the case, but I just haven't seen anything. Let me just zoom this in a little bit. There we go. So, with this, I mean, this is deeply, and thank you for the 5, by the way. Thank you. Don't let me forget that. Gotham, by the way, thank you for the 2. I like how people either hate it or love it. Yeah, we'll look. I want to look at Maddie's review here in a few minutes, so we'll check that out because he actually was somebody that came out and was pretty disappointed by it. But yeah, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that. Do you consider Hellblade 2 a next gen demo? I consider it a current gen demo. That's what every game this generation should be capable of achieving graphically, but you know, this generation has been something else. I'll tell you what. So that's the whole thing. But yeah, thank you guys for the super chats. Appreciate you. So this was leaked in an email. One of the documents is a 2020 email from Xbox chief Phil Spencer via The Verge, in which he said that Nintendo was the most desirable company Microsoft could acquire. Dude, can you imagine Microsoft buying Nintendo? Jesus. Tucked into the end of that email is a comment that Microsoft's board of directors has seen the full write-up on Nintendo and Valve and is fully supportive on either if opportunity arises. So Microsoft, how this would work, in order to spend billions of dollars, that's not really a Phil decision. That is a board of directors decision. So the board of directors would have to go in there and provide approval to do that. Let me just see. So these people, this is like board committees. No, that's Microsoft bylaws, executive officers, board members. Here we go. These are the people that would decide if that happens. These are the people. Reed, partner with Greylock Partners. Hugh Johnston, senior executive vice president, chief financial officer, the Walt Disney Company. Head honcho at Disney is involved with it. Gap Inc., former executive vice president, chief financial officer with Gap, chief executive officer of Engie, chief financial officer of Citi. Of course, Satya, the CEO and chairman. Sandra, lead independent director. Penny Pritzker, the chairman and founder of PSP Partners. Carlos Rodriguez, former chief executive officer, ADP Inc. Charles Charles W. Scharf, CEO and president, Wells Fargo. And then John Stanton, chairman of Trilogy Partnerships, and Emma Walmsley, CEO of GSK. These are the people that would approve of that. So these are the people that are in charge of Microsoft that would approve an acquisition of, like, in one case, Activision Blizzard, King. These are the guys that voted to approve that and spend $70 billion on it. And then if they were to acquire a Valve or Nintendo, they would also have to vote on that. So what's happened is that Phil and his team have produced, as you can see in the email, they have supported write-ups, basically, or produced write-ups to justify the acquisition of a company like Nintendo. So they write in a big document the argument for buying them and say, oh, if we bought Nintendo, we'd have access to all of these major franchises. We would have access to the Switch, which is a hardware king, and we would have access to all of that. So we'd be able to immediately be one of the top competitors in terms of hardware. Forget the Xbox. Now the Switch is part of Xbox, basically. It would be crazy. Or technically, it would be probably under Microsoft, but it would still be Nintendo, and they'd keep Xbox and Nintendo totally separate. And with Valve, they would now own the biggest distributor of gaming software on PC. And that would be, their bread and butter. All of a sudden, that would be a cash cow for them. So they have pitched all of this. And you can see in this email from the FTC hearings, look at this. Takeshi, I totally agree that Nintendo is the prime asset for us in gaming, and today gaming is our most likely path to consumer relevance. I've had numerous conversations with the LT of Nintendo about tighter collaboration, and feel like if any US company would have a chance with Nintendo, we are probably the best option. The unfortunate, or fortunate for Nintendo, situation is that Nintendo is sitting on a big pile of cash. They have a board of directors that until recently has not pushed for further increases in market growth or stock appreciation. I say until recently, as our former Microsoft board of directors member, Value Act, has been heavily acquiring shares of Nintendo. And I've kept in touch with Mason Morfitt as he's been acquiring. It's likely he will be pushing for more from Nintendo stock, which could create opportunities for us. Without that catalyst, I don't see an angle to a near-term mutually agreeable merger of Nintendo and Microsoft, and I don't think a hostile action would be a good move. So we are playing the long game, but our board of directors has seen the full write-up on Nintendo and Valve, and they're fully supportive on either if the opportunity arises, as am I. Little translation from corporate speak. So a former board of directors member, Value Act, has been heavily acquiring shares of Nintendo. And Mason Morfitt, as he's been acquiring, has kept in direct contact with Phil Spencer. Their goal is to basically have somebody go in, and this is granted 4 years old, so they're playing the very, very long game. But if you have Nintendo over here, Nintendo, and then you have the monstrosity that is Microsoft over here. Microsoft, yay. There's a little bit of crossover. You would think it would be totally independent because one is like a Japanese company and one is an American company, and that's mostly true, but they have some holders or stockholders that are shared. So if they have somebody that owns a chunk of Microsoft, that person can also go over and buy a chunk of Nintendo. And their mutually beneficial goal, what would be best for them, since they hold a little chunk of Nintendo and a chunk of Microsoft, what would be best for them is if Microsoft bought Nintendo. So they make this cut a little bit bigger. And then they make it a little bit bigger. And each time it gets bigger, they have more of a say. They have more power, and they can push Nintendo's board of directors, of which they may eventually be a member. And they can push them to pressure into selling to Microsoft or being open to acquisitions. And this is like a little loophole in corporate law in the US, because you might think about that and be like, that seems like very underhanded and sneaky, that basically an agent for a company like Microsoft could go in there and take cuts of Nintendo and then use that to leverage Nintendo and force them into a position where they're selling to Microsoft or merging or something. But that's just how it works. Like, this guy is an independent party. In this case, you know, if we just say that his name is, you know, Mason Morfitt, as you see down there, if this is just Mason, he's just some dude that owns a cut of Microsoft and owns a cut of Nintendo. And of course, he's going to tell them, yeah, I'd love it if you sold here. I win-win with that. Not only will I get paid out when Nintendo sells, because they'll pay bigger than, you know, the market price, but also Microsoft will become stronger as a company, and my value, my cut that I own right here, just became more valuable. So boom, I win-win. So Mason is going to keep pushing for that. And it's not just Mason. It's big corporations of institutional investors. It's groups that come in and they might buy another chunk. And then these guys come in and buy a chunk. And these guys come in and buy a chunk. And then these guys come in and buy a chunk. And it can take a decade to happen. But eventually Nintendo will look up and be like, holy crap, 40% of our stock is owned by these institutions that all want us to sell to Microsoft. Oh, God. So it can be messy. My stance on all of this is I think this would be horrible for the gaming industry. Like, do not get it twisted. I did not like the Microsoft, Blizzard, Activision, King acquisition. I did not like the merger of those companies. I thought it was largely bad for the industry. There's a situation in which you could see it being good, where Microsoft comes in and takes these really like greedy companies and it's like, yeah, now you're owned by a $3 trillion company, so you don't have to be that greedy, just make good games. That's technically possible, but we have no reason to believe that that will happen. Okay, if it does, awesome, but that at this point is just wishful thinking, right? If Microsoft were to buy Valve, they would then have pretty damn close to a monopoly on all PC gaming. Not only do you need largely Microsoft as a platform with Windows, but Luke, you can play on Linux. Yeah, like 35 people can. I mean, okay, more than 35 people, but 99.9 whatever % of people are probably playing on Windows computers. So they have that cut. And then they also have the cut in the form of owning Valve. It would be disastrous. It would be terrible. I don't like giving any one party that much power. And Valve, I think, has done a pretty good job of having consumer interests at heart. And so I think that that's good to keep them independent. Buying Nintendo, I think, is just... It could be very bad. Could be very bad. Not only could it suck the soul out of Nintendo, but at this point, I don't think anybody has a lot of confidence in Microsoft's ability to run a platform. And Nintendo, part of what makes them such a unique company within the gaming space is how they run their platform, how they run their business, and how they keep their ecosystem intact. And I just don't see this ending well. Now, they've said that they're interested in doing it. We all know that they're interested in doing it. The difference is Valve is privately held, so it's not like, you know, it's founded by Mike Harrington, Gabe Newell. It's not publicly traded or anything. It's run by a private organization, and they don't need to go out and like listen to a board of directors or anything. If Gabe wants to keep control of it, he can keep control of it. The one situation where I could see this potentially changing is if Gabe wants to do what like Robert Altman wanted to do when he owned ZeniMax. And if he's just like, hey, I want to bail and I want to just go buy a super giga yacht and I'm going to go sail around the Mediterranean with Jeff Bezos and we're going to just rock and roll. Then maybe. We've seen when somebody founds a company and they get to that age where they just want to like leave the busy work and they just want to retire, they can sometimes do things they wouldn't otherwise do, such as selling their company to a buyer that might be bad for the industry, but at least they're getting out with their payday. And I mean, it's possible that even happened with Ninja Theory, speaking of Hellblade, where the founders got paid out when Microsoft bought them back in 2018, and then they released a giga flop of a live service game, and now Hellblade 2, but most of them have left, and you know, now Tamim's gone and they got their check and bailed. So it's possible something similar happens with Gabe, but I don't really see that happening. Gabe seems to be somebody who is perfectly fine with how many billions of dollars he has now. I don't think he needs to go off and sell out to Microsoft. You know, he's got plenty of cash, no doubt about it. So I know there's rumors going around, but even if they offer 16 billion, that doesn't mean that Valve will sell. Okay. Just like if somebody comes up to you and says, hey, I want to buy your shirt off of your back right now. I'll pay $50 for it. Might be worth more than, or it might be worth less than $50. That might be a really good offer, but that still doesn't mean that you're going to take it. You know, you're like, bro, I'm at a funeral. Stop. It's like, it's a good offer though. So just because somebody offers you money for something does not mean that anything will actually come from it. But yeah, all of this to say, I think it would be disastrous for the industry if Microsoft were to buy Valve, or Nintendo. I mean, I would not be happy with either of those. I think that would be very bad. Very, very bad. Okay. What about Amazon buying Valve? I don't want Valve bought by anybody. I want them to be independent. I mean, I just don't want anybody buying it. Why not buy FromSoft? From Software is already owned by a bunch of corporations. People don't realize this. They think it's like a totally independent company. It's not. It's owned by like Kadokawa Corporation owns 69 giggity percent. Six Joy Hong Kong owns 16% of it. Sony owns 14% of it. Like, in order to sell, this company who owns the biggest chunk of it would have to be willing to sell. And I don't see them doing that. Like, this is their biggest company without a doubt. Like, they own a bunch of other little media companies and stuff, but nothing I've ever recognized. Granted, I don't live in their primary markets, so maybe if I lived there, I would know more of this stuff, but From Software is the only one that's really gone mainstream across all of these, you know? So there's no way. I don't think Kadokawa, I don't think they sell it at all. There's just no way. So can't really do it. Can't really do it. From Software are the darlings of the gaming industry right now. Yeah, I mean, Elden Ring was just a huge success and it crossed the mainstream, and so people got super stoked on it. I hope they can keep it up. I really hope they can keep it up, because as we've seen, even companies, you're like, there's no way they blow it. Eventually they blow it. 5 years ago, it was ridiculous to think that like CDPR was going to blow Cyberpunk. It would have gotten you laughed out of whatever venue you were. You know, but now, same thing. Same thing with like, if you saw, same thing with like Rocksteady blowing their next game after Arkham Knight. People would be like, what are you talking about? And then we saw Suicide Squad. We're like, okay, maybe. And then we got Suicide Squad and you're like, okay, yeah, no, makes sense. Checks out. Yep. But although blow it somehow, Miyazaki won't live forever. Well, and I mean, I think the Soulsborne franchises have been really, really huge for them. But like they did go out and try something a little different with like Armored Core. And Armored Core, don't get me wrong, it didn't review badly, but it did not review on the same level as like Elden Ring. Technically, this is their most recent full game. This came out after Elden Ring. This is what they did after. And I know some people are like, well, but Miyazaki only consulted on it early. He worked with like the combat and gameplay, and then he left to work on the DLC for Elden Ring. And that's true, but this is still a From Software game, you know? It's still a From Software game. So if you're talking about the company, you have to talk about the company on the whole. In terms of Miyazaki himself, his projects have pretty much been the things that are always freakishly successful. So it seems like Miyazaki is the one that is the requirement for the game to really pop off. Because again, you compare it to his last game. I mean, come on. That's outrageous. I've been replaying Elden Ring to prep for the DLC and having a great time. Love it dearly. Still just as good as it was back when it launched. If not a little better, because it's more balanced. So. Yeah. Oh yeah, Mr. Shiloh, we're live on YouTube and Twitch. YouTube chat seems or tends to be much more lively. We have a lot more lurkers on Twitch. I'm 6.5 hours into Hellblade 2 and I've only just reached the 2020 showcase section. Either you're playing with your feet or you've been spending a lot of time in like photo mode. Otherwise, I have no freaking idea how you get there with that much time. Judson Watkins, thank you for the 5. Wouldn't be big backlash if Microsoft buys Nintendo from the gaming community. They're already tarnished reputation like they're doing right now. I don't think they care. It's like, oh, some people on X freaked out. Like, okay. I don't think they care. You know, like for them, their ultimate goal is to cater to the shareholders and to keep the shareholders happy. And if they do that, problem solved. Problem solved. So I don't think that they really care that much what the general gaming populace cares. I just don't think they really, I don't think it really matters. He's just walking in a circle. He's playing blindfolded and he's never played it before. Blindfold first run. Here we go. That's how they got to the 8-hour number. Oh, we figured it out. There we go. What headset am I using? This is the, I don't know where the box is. It's the SteelSeries Arctis Nova Pro. That sounds right. I think that's right. So I think that's right. Yeah. But yeah, as for Microsoft buying Nintendo, I don't think they would care, but I think them buying Nintendo is much more likely than them buying Valve, to be clear. Buying Valve would require Gabe basically being like, yeah, I'm done. I want to go retire and I don't want to do anything. I could see that. Buying Nintendo is possible because Nintendo's publicly traded and there's things they could do to just basically force it. You hear Phil Spencer, he's like, yeah, we could force it. We don't want to do a hostile takeover though, because I think that would be messy and not really worth it. But we're going to play the long game and slow game and we're going to push it. And I think what's going to happen is they're just going to try to slowly get other investors to buy up stakes of Nintendo. And then they will all collectively go to the Nintendo board and be like, you need to drive this stock price up. You need to increase the value of the company. And they're going to try to force them into a position where they either partner or sell. Maybe they do something like Tencent's been doing. Maybe they open it up and Microsoft comes in and buys 49.999% of the company. Maybe they do that, but yeah. I feel like the Japanese government would negate it. I've heard in the articles I've read, I've read, that Japanese regulators tend to be more welcoming to outside money coming in. They like the outside investment. So I don't know if that's the case. I from my understanding, I thought that Japan was going to be more hardcore with regulations and stuff, but apparently they are open to foreign investment. So Microsoft came in and was like, hey, yeah, we want to throw billions of dollars at your economy. Want to play ball? Maybe they would. Yeah. Let's see. Spencer, thank you for the 2. Is Ninja Theory next on the chopping block, you think? Personally, I don't think so. They've apparently greenlit whatever their next project is. And my understanding is that basically they did this live service game in 2020 and then they canceled support for it in early 2021. And then they really started full development on Hellblade 2 shortly after that. So really, this has only been in development for 2.5, 3 years probably, which explains why it's only 5 hours. My problem is that they tried to frame it like they announced it in 2019, in December of 2019. And then they've been showing it off for years and years and years. So even though they only went into full production a year and a half, 2 years after they announced it, I'm like, people just had different expectations because of all of this. It's a mess. It's a mess. And here's the deal. At the end of the day, it's just meant to be a cool game people download and have a fun time with on Game Pass. And I think that's what it is. I think knowing what this company is capable of, or at least was capable of in the past, it's particularly frustrating because it's I know you guys could have taken the knobs and turned them up, but instead, other than graphics, it's really hard to come up with anything that Hellblade 2 does better than the original. I think the puzzles are actually worse in this game. I think the level design and encounter design, except for one example, is worse across the board. There are way bigger and more interesting set pieces in the first game. There's a much better ending, in my opinion, in the first game. Everywhere I look, I'm the first game is better in every way. You know, I'm struggling to find the hook. Wombatter95, thank you for resubbing with Prime. Ooh, baby, thank you. Ninja Theory has some great games. Enslaved is one of the best third-person adventure games of the 360 gen. Yeah, they have in the past known what they're doing, and no doubt Hellblade 2 is impressive in a lot of ways. It's also very disappointing in a lot of ways, I think. Let's see. I read those. I read that one. Matthew, thank you for the 5. Are you going to expand on your Hellblade 2 thoughts? And every review just talks about graphics and audio, yet the Order 1886 got blasted. Yeah, it's been pretty interesting, the reviews. And I pulled up this one that we'll look at in a second, and I want to break it down because I've seen basically two splits in the reviews. There are some that view the graphics and the production value as enough of a feature that it justifies the short runtime. And they say things like the gameplay being lackluster, the combat and the narrative and all of that stuff kind of takes a second place to the overall experience, to the broader experience that they're trying to portray, which is very immersive and all of that. And while I can understand that, and I do think there will be some people for whom this is like a game of the year. Some people are going to play this and be like, it is a masterpiece. I have no doubt there will be some people like that. But coming off of a lot of excitement from the first game, and you know, I really loved it, I was expecting at the very least improvements to the first game, and I don't see it. If you've never played a Hellblade game before, if you didn't play the first game, then maybe this is like masterpiece level because it's something you've just never experienced. But for me, it just feels painfully safe and very, very frustratingly like, I mean, it's basically just a tech demo. I mean, that's basically what it feels like. It has the gameplay depth of a tech demo. And if we're going to bash games like Rise, Son of Rome, if we're going to bash games like The Order 1886, then I think we got to be consistent. As for its current Metacritic score, I would give it time. It's going to, I feel, drop once more outside reviewers get their hands on it. I know some people, I don't think I have it pulled up anymore, but I saw one person, yeah, I don't have it. Yeah, I thought I saved it, but I didn't. Anyway, I saw some people on X that were posting and being like, well, you know, it's sure, it's not like the most amazing game ever, but you know, I still think for Xbox, this is a masterpiece to have on their platform, you know, 10 out of 10. It's like, and then you look at their profiles and it's like they only cover Xbox stuff and they only talk about that. And it gets harder to give their review a lot of like weight when you know their background, right? In the same way that like if a hardcore Sony fanboy that is always like, yeah, we need to you know, go in there and burn down Microsoft headquarters because they're destroying the industry by buying up competitors, blah, blah, blah. We need to do all this. And they're just like the most toxic person ever. If they go and then give some plate like what's that new Rise of the Ronin. If they give Rise of the Ronin 10 out of 10, you're like, can I really trust that review? Should I, like, how much weight can I put into that review? Probably not much. But a lot of reviewers I've seen that tend to be much more independent in their thinking and maybe have less predictable opinions on stuff because they just tend to go out and do and say precisely what they think. They've been much less stoked on it. And one review that I think was actually very, very fair that he's actually gotten some flack over was Maddie's. Maddie posted to Twitter/X this little thing. Disappointed by Hellblade 2 as a big fan of the first. Puzzles, characters, pacing, themes are not as strong here despite its beauty. There's sluggish pacing in its 5-hour runtime, which lacks an essential fun factor, which I completely agree with all of that. Some people are saying, oh, if you got through it in 5.5 hours or whatever, you were playing wrong. I got that in some of my comments on my video. You're playing it wrong, Luke. You're supposed to really experiment with photo mode. You're supposed to go through and basically not use the sprint or jog button. It's not even sprint. You're not supposed to use the jog button. You're supposed to just go through the levels really slowly and carefully and cautiously. Okay, then why did they give me a jog button? But okay, it's like when people say, well, no, you actually ruined Elden Ring by using summons. The designers didn't want you to use summons. I'm like, then why did they put them in the freaking game? What are you talking about? Same thing. Actually, in Death Stranding, you're not supposed to use vehicles. You're supposed to only use the like zip lines that you build. So anybody that uses vehicles for deliveries is basically a chump. And you're like, bro, Kojima put them in there for a reason. Like the designers put them in there. What are you talking about? Anyway. But he followed it up with this. I usually keep to myself on Twitter because the platform is at times not fun to be on, and I typically know better not to engage. Yeah, just in general, like you see some of these content creators that are like terminally online, and they're always in the comment section replying to every single tweet. And you look at their profiles, and it's like, bro, you tweet like 4 or 5 times an hour. It's like, stop it, get some help. But he follows on. I agree with him though. It's good often to just step away. The replies I'm getting here are genuinely disheartening. People calling me a liar, claiming I throw my opinions to sustain my career, threatening the game I'm working on, pretending I'm a PlayStation double agent. Yeah, I did see comments where people are like, see, this just proves that Maddie is on PlayStation's payroll and is an inside agent. It's like, bro, you guys have been, go outside. Like, what do you mean? You think that PlayStation has people on a payroll just for double agent? Like, this isn't some sort of spy thriller. Like, he's just a YouTuber. Like, chillax. I didn't like the game as much as you'd hope. I'm sorry if that bothers some of you, but singing to personal insults, threats, and wild delusions over my take on a game is nasty, and we should all do better than that. I totally agree. It's outrageous. But I think why it triggered so many people is because he posted a review just outlining this, saying that he was disappointed in the game. And Maddie has, an Xbox podcast. He's got a lot of Xbox themed coverage specifically. That's kind of the niche that he's settled into in the last few years. And it only made sense. I mean, he's covered a lot of Bethesda stuff in years past. So once they were acquired by Xbox, it made sense. Like, go where your niche is. I get it. But, yeah, how dare Maddie be honest and honestly reflect his opinions of a game that he just didn't find that impressive.
With our Hellblade 2 review, and yeah, I found the game extremely disappointing, and I'm going to get into that. But definitely between a rock
Sony pony
and a hard place on this review. Not fun, I'll tell you what, because the Xbox community despises me. They think I hate the brand. And then we have PlayStation fans who despise me as well because they think I love Xbox. And then also there's that kind of weird factor in the middle of I kind of made comparisons between Ninja Theory's potential and Naughty Dog, and they didn't like that much. And that's a take that's going to age like milk based on this review. And yeah, I'd like to issue a retraction on that one because I was definitely dead wrong. Worse yet,
I mean, that was basically the pitch when they bought Ninja Theory in 2018. People thought like, okay, they're going to come in and they're going to be Xbox's Naughty Dog. They're going to come in and have huge budgets and just go crazy and do amazingly high production value stuff. And it'll be awesome, right? Which I agree would be awesome. Xbox needs somebody like that. And Ninja Theory, I still think could be that, but they need to spend more than like 2.5, 3 years on a game. And they need to probably hire a lot more people because it's currently a team of about 80 people. And that includes, my understanding is it includes even like administrators, the company accountant, all of that stuff. So maybe that is just the devs. But either way, it's a small team. It's a small team to be making AAA stuff. So if they were able to expand and go bigger and better, that could be really, really awesome. And I'd love to see it. Hellblade 2 is not that. And I think a lot of us were hopeful that maybe this could be the first step towards that. And while it's an impressive graphical showcase, they have a long way to go before they're anywhere near the scale of Naughty Dog. Certainly. And then as for, being, upset or upsetting people who are PlayStation fanboys versus Xbox fanboys, I think whenever you play in the mud, you're going to get dirty. And I think engaging with any sort of console war, anything, or those communities will get you dirty, and it's going to be messy regardless. Like, I don't try to engage with any of the console war BS, and I don't think Maddie tries to actively engage with it. But when you do a podcast that's specifically for one platform, I think you're going to get a lot of those people gravitating towards you anyways. And I've even had to juggle it where, like, for example, we covered Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, and we got a lot of people that came to the channels from those videos covering that debacle. And some of the people that came from that were just like the cynical types. They just liked coming in and watching games crash and burn. So literally any game I would try to talk about or cover, everybody's like, yeah, but when does this flop? When does this get? And it's like, no, that's not what we do. We skeptically evaluate things. And when there's a bunch of smoke, there's usually a fire. But if a game doesn't look to have much smoke or any smoke, I'm not going to pretend like this is some sort of big scandal just for like rage bait and stuff. And then you get those people calling you like, you know, simps for this or that or whatever. But eventually they just get bored and leave. You just can't feed them at all. You know, you just can't engage with it at all. But yeah, it's the Xbot community. Xbot community is particularly wild, as is the PlayStation, like Sony Pony side of things. So it's just in general all insane. And I think at the end of the day, everybody will agree, if you are a grown man and you tie up your personality into a hunk of plastic and silicon, like, touch grass, it's okay. We're gamers, we play video games, it's all great. You can have a preferred console, you can enjoy PlayStation more than Xbox or vice versa. That's all totally cool. But when you go to the point where you're like threatening people's lives because they happen to play on another box than you, like, it's a platform. It's a platform. Unless you're a PC gamer, in which case PC Master Race. Rah, rah. Okay.
The circumstances surrounding Hellblade 2 couldn't be worse for Ninja Theory. There was already a lot of anticipation for the game. Ninja Theory was acquired by Xbox.
Oh, dude, Mixer. I forgot.
For Ninja Theory. There was already a lot of
Look at that.
anticipation for the game.
E3 2017 briefing featured by Mixer. I remember when I went to E3 2019, they had whole booths set up just for Mixer. Remember, this was supposed to be the Twitch killer. This was going to be the new big streaming platform, and then they shut it down and abandoned it. But man, yeah, Mixer, that's where Ninja went to. I think he got paid out like 30 something million dollars to go leave Twitch and start streaming on Mixer. He lost a lot of viewers, but he got one hell of a payday.
Theory was acquired by Xbox in 2018 with what felt like a public statement to gamers that despite what had happened during the Xbox One generation, the company was here to stay and invest in smaller games as a part of their business moving forward. The feeling right now is that Xbox needs its biggest win yet in a time of great uncertainty surrounding both the company's direction and the lifespan of its 30-plus studios. At the same time, Xbox is under fire because of its lack of marketing for Hellblade 2 and what is their first major exclusive in 2024 and a potential prestige product, something they've said behind the scenes they're looking for, to rebuild some public confidence in the brand. The trick is, guys, gals, is Xbox did market this game a lot. You've possibly seen like every big moment of Hellblade 2. My Naughty Dog take may have been completely incorrect, but at least I can hang my hat on the fact that I called this one from pretty far away as to why Hellblade 2 wasn't being marketed. It wasn't really, in my opinion, being sent out to die. There just wasn't much left to show, as I'll display in this review. Announced alongside the Xbox.
Yeah, no joke. I said in my review, there's like what I would consider two big set piece moments. If you've played the game, you know what I'm talking about. Let's, dare I say, giant moments. No? Okay. There's like two big moments. I thought there was going to be a big moment at the end of the game, but there basically isn't. The game just is over before it even happens. One of those two big, like, giant moments was already shown in the gameplay trailer with the giant crawling out of the sea. That's one of the two big moments in this game, and they already spoiled it and shared it. So I agree. In hindsight, it's like, what more could they have shown? They either spoil the only thing left that was cool in the game, or like they show more walking. Like, what would they even do? Like, there's nothing you could really do.
Series X in 2019. Many expected Hellblade 2 sooner, and I think the game would have actually fared better in my experience if it were just that, maybe a launch title or something like that. It's a game that feels like it's been lapped by much of its competition, such as a Plague Tale Requiem.
Oh, dude. The whole time I was playing Hellblade 2, I was like, bro, I think Plague Tale Requiem is just better. Like, it's not on the same level graphically, sure, but it's a very interesting game mechanically. It has some really interesting gameplay mechanics. Narratively, it hit me way harder than Hellblade 2, like way harder. Maybe it's just because I'm the father of a little boy, and so the whole thing with Hugo and everything was particularly haunting for me. But I love Plague Tale Requiem. I think it's a tremendous game. And it's a franchise. When was the first Plague Tale? It was around the same time as Hellblade, right? Plague Tale Innocence came out 2019. It came out 2019. So they've put out Plague Tale Innocence and a Plague Tale Requiem in the same time that Ninja Theory has been working on this 5-hour game. That's crazy. That's wild. Oh, Katie Cap, right now, go install Requiem. Like, do it to it. It will blow your mind. It is so good.
Every conceivable way. It's a game that could serve as a case study to show how perfectionism has seeped into AAA style games and lets them spin their wheels for far too long with little meaningful progress made for the actual players of the game, merely just the technology. It's a game that perfectly shows how a larger team size doesn't grant you a better game. Ninja Theory was around like 20 some odd people when Hellblade 1 was made. They were 80 with Hellblade 2. And I think you can feel that in the visuals, but when you play the game, nope. It's a game that shows you how mere graphical fidelity can no longer carry an experience, and in my opinion, never could. Worse yet, I think Hellblade 1 is far better in almost every aspect. Its level design, pacing, storytelling, and even how it gets to the core of touching issues.
Just that is cooler than anything in the game. Just
Aspect. Its level design.
Her trip to Helheim is cooler than anything else
Pacing,
in the second game.
Storytelling, and even how it gets to
Like, that sequence, freaking awesome. There is nothing that cool in the entirety of Hellblade 2.
the core of touching issues like psychosis, the series' primary theme it delves deep into. Hell, the combat could be argued as being better in the original, given you no longer have mechanics like dodge roll attacks, and that's saying something given Hellblade 2's combat isn't really having much going on there. If I were to define this as anything, to put it in a little bottle here, it's Xbox's The Order 1886 moment.
Thank you.
But even then,
It's crazy. We did not talk before we made these reviews. We made our reviews in isolation. I think a lot of people think that like reviewers are maybe like hopping on Zoom calls behind the scenes to like coordinate their opinions and stuff. No, it's just sometimes when people are looking at something critically, they come to the same conclusions. It's crazy how that works, right? But I mean, I think a lot of us are on the same page with this, where it feels like that Order 1886 moment.
it's kind of a stretch, which is why it's not in the title of the review. I really like games such as The Order 1886 and Rise Son of Rome. Both served as showcases for their respective hardware and made no hesitation about flexing their technical might, yet they didn't leave the most important factor behind: fun. Both of these games, in my opinion, are very fun to play when they let you play. Rise's combat is a guilty pleasure, and its story is extremely entertaining, leading to me doing full playthroughs twice over when I first bought my Xbox One at launch. The Order's world and story take time, but when it picks up alongside its gameplay, I think it's excellent, and then it ends. It's that line there that you can closely draw between The Order and Hellblade 2. Hellblade 2 has its fleeting moments of excellence beyond its visuals, but they're quickly forgotten due to most of the experience consisting of walking forward, boring puzzles where there are far too many, might I add, an unreasonably limited amount of combat encounters, and an ending that leaves you feeling like there was so much left on the cutting room floor here. I'm going to get into Rich.
Again, I seriously feel like they just didn't show the last quarter of the game. Like, it feels that way.
Detail now, but that's the too long didn't read. Hellblade 2 is a game that certainly I was championing. I don't make Naughty Dog comparisons lightly, and they completely missed the mark in my opinion, and I far prefer Hellblade 1. So ladies and gentlemen, if you're new here and you're into the occasional day one review, consider subscribing. Let's start off with the story. I'm going to go very light on this section because we're talking about a game that has maybe a runtime of 5 hours. So Senna was traveling to kill the Northmen who are abducting her people and enslaving them. She's quickly derailed from that plan in a tale that feels like it made very little sense until the story's dying moments. Instead of this being a story focused on just Senua alone, she's joined by a support cast that doesn't get much.
This is a great example of what I mentioned in my review with the over-processing. This is a cutscene. What is in focus here in this shot? Like, is the camera's focus pulled on Senua? You know, just so I want to avoid anybody being like, Luke, that's a compressed video. Let me get my uncompressed, well, not totally uncompressed, but it's extremely high bitrate footage. Gameplay. Please hold. I'll pull this up here so nobody can say that I'm being unfair with it. Where is a cutscene I could look at? Because I mentioned in my review, oh, it's the same shot. I mentioned in my review that the cutscenes often look worse than the gameplay because they overprocess it to the point where you lose all sharpness. And it might be hard to tell on stream, so I'll zoom in. I don't know where the focus is pulled right now. I think the focus was pulled to about eye or chin depth from the camera, but it's so overprocessed with this chromatic aberration on the outside of the frame that's way too aggressive that nothing is actually sharp in this entire shot. The whole thing is blurry. And then they move and you think maybe they're going to adjust the focus a little bit. And now it looks like the focus is pulled over here. It's a little sharper, but even still, like, it is over processed to high holy hell. Like, look at all that fringing and all that stuff. Like, it's a cool visual style, sure, but it makes it actively difficult to figure out what you're looking at. And then you go to other sequences like this and everything is totally sharp. You know, you go to gameplay and all of a sudden it's fine. It's just wild to me that the gameplay actually looks worse in a lot of cases than the cutscenes. Just because it's overprocessed. It's like they knew that they were dealing with, okay, well, the camera's going to be really close. We got to do all this crazy effects and stuff. It's like, bro, less is more sometimes. Less is more. Calm down a little bit. Calm down just a little bit. Because you see, even this is a great example of overly aggressive depth of field, in my opinion. This is just a director of photography, like, frustration I have. A lot of games that have really impressive visuals will do this. Because depth of field is seen as, like, very cinematic, right? And that's the big thing with this game, is it's all cinematic. And you can see the model that they have here is crazy detailed. They have the pores of her skin, faint remnants of, like, the charcoal on her face and all this stuff. Amazingly detailed models. Even the teeth, you can see the teeth are yellowed around the edges. It's wildly detailed. It's crazy. But it's so freaking shallow with the depth of field. The only thing that's actually, like, in focus is, like, this bit here. Whoop, let me get a pen selected. It's like this bit here, this part of her cheek here, and then maybe, like, this part of her lip, and then this part of the teeth. And then, like, this part. Like, that's all that's in focus. Then, like, this little stretch of band of her headband. Like, these are the only things in focus because of how shallow the depth of field is. It's only this much of this, like, vertical slice of your face that's in focus. And all they needed to do was, like, you know, tighten up the aperture a little bit. Just a tad. Go to, like, an f2, an f2.8, something like that. You don't need an f1 point or f0.002 or whatever this is in order to make something look good. It really annoys me that so many companies do this, where they, not companies, but, like, cinematographers will do it, where they just hyper overdo the depth of field. It's really frustrating. Yeah, in photography, normally you're supposed to make the eyes in focus. Yeah, and it's constantly moving. That's the thing. I think they did a manual thing. So they did the thing where they manually adjust the focus and stuff. I think that's the goal, but it's, to me, it doesn't really click together. I find it actively frustrating. Let's see. Let's see. I read that one. How's Warhammer going, Luke? Oh, good. It's been a minute since I played. I got to meet up with Caleb and do another game. But thank you for the 2. Thank you. Yeah, I got to finish my Necron army too. Matthews Media, thank you for the 2. Reviews are like great graphics / audio, 10 out of 10, lol. Yeah, I just don't, I know it's like, well, this was never supposed to be a gameplay heavy game. I understand that. But at the very least, like, I'm looking for what is the hook? What makes this worth playing? Is it the story? No, I found the story shockingly poorly done. It ends when it really should be beginning. It just, across the board, it's done very, very poorly in my view. It's like graphically, yeah, it's pretty to look at. But you can also get that by watching a YouTube video of a playthrough of it. Like, you don't need to play it yourself to get that same thing. So it's like, okay, well then what's like the gimmick of the binaural audio? Yeah, it's largely worn off. Doesn't work as well in this one compared to the first one. Okay. Gameplay? Nope. Gameplay is really lackluster. Okay. Well, or at least the set pieces and big moments cool enough that to experience it yourself would be worth it. Nope. Significantly worse set pieces than the first game. Like across the board, it's like, what is the hook? What is this? What makes this good? What makes this worth playing? And there's just not really much of anything, unfortunately.
Much of an opportunity to shine outside of one who joins you at the journey's very beginning, and his development does add quite a lot to the story. Otherwise, the short runtime here.
See, again, what the hell is this focus? Like, I just showed you my recording. It's why I said in my review, like, you will be hard pressed to find a sharp edge in most cutscenes because it's so freaking over-processed with this wildly overused chromatic aberration. Drives me up the wall. A lot of the time it's done to cover up some of the like rough edges in digital like CGI. Basically you'll see it in movies a lot. It's why a lot of like Marvel movies have a very unique look whenever they use CGI on something, and it's because they kind of do this post-processing to cover it up, cover up the rough edges. But with this, like, we're in a video game and you have the black bars already. There's only so much to look at on screen and you can't even get it in focus. Like, this is a YouTube video, right? Well, that's why I pulled up my recording just a second ago to show you guys. Like, even in my footage, this is my footage, which is recorded at 4K, crazy, crazy high bit rate. And even with this, like, you can still see part of his like lower jaw is maybe in focus here, like right here. His eyes aren't in focus. All of this, because you can tell like all of these edges, all of this chromatic aberration that's going on, you can tell that they did like a radial filter on it. So the center of the frame, there's like an oval like this that's not affected by the chromatic aberration. And then everything on the outside of that oval is affected more intensely the further away you get from the oval. Really standard radial filter on something like that. And it just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't look good. Like it's overdone. It's just really, really overdone in my humble opinion.
Hurts as these added characters don't have much time to develop. Meanwhile, Senua's journey is a depiction of how others interact with one who suffers from psychosis, and the game displaying how her darkness, as they put it, is a gift that can save her people. I think? I'm not entirely sure here. Right? And not because I'm an idiot. It's because I think the game, compared to the original, does not convey its themes well enough throughout, again, this very short runtime. Remember in the first game, Senua was cast out because her psychosis is claimed to be a darkness handed down from her mother. That journey was about her overcoming that alongside the grief of losing the only one who ever loved her and trying to bring him back to life. In the sequel, Senua is still coping with death, but in a different way, as it's following her wherever she goes, and she starts to begin to blame herself for the death that surrounds her both past and present. In Hellblade 1, everything from its combat to even the puzzles was in service of an impactful story being told. You didn't just fight to break things up, you fought because it was a depiction of Senua's struggles at that moment. You didn't solve puzzles to extend the length of a game, at least most times. It was typically done in synchronization with Senua learning something about herself or the world. Hellblade 2 is the opposite in all regards, and perhaps that was the saddest part for me about this review. It feels like all that Ninja Theory did to make the first game special was completely forgotten for pretty graphics, beautiful lighting, and exceptional motion capture. I think it's wonderful because it definitely is going to be a technical showpiece, but as someone who loved the first Hellblade, I feel like we totally missed what made that game special. Now, for those who haven't played Hellblade before, one of its greatest strengths, and it is present in this game, is being unable to tell what's real and what's not. However, I think there was a thread that Ninja Theory kind of had their hand on that they would pull at times to really connect things and make sense of what was real and what wasn't, whether it be through how encounters were set up and what Senua was actually fighting. Was it her personal demons or actual enemies? Hellblade 2 does just that. This game is super seamless in its storytelling. There's no breaks for load screens, nothing like that. It just goes, and that's one of the best parts about the game is you'll just have these beautiful transitions between reality and maybe not reality, and then big cutscene and gameplay, and it's all, again, beautiful and seamless. It is definitely something that many AAA developers are going to study, but I think as a player of games, there isn't going to be a lot for people to take away here because, again, when you go down to the story, the main thing I loved about Hellblade 1, as I raved about it in my original review, Hellblade 2, I think, just delivers things in such a messier way. And even when you start to come to understand what they're trying to do here by the game's final moments, it ends.
It's over. I saw who in chat said it. It was so funny. Hold on. Yeah, Juicebox. She's being too expressive again. Hit the blur button. Dude, seriously. It's like all through the game. They're like, nope, beep. And it's just blur everywhere. Like even this beautiful shot. Wish I could see detail. Really wish I could see some detail. That'd be great. But no. Just do this. Blur it to shit. Come on, guys. Yeah. Hellblade go brrr.
Just like I mentioned with the Order 1886, you're like, okay, I'm on board here. If we get like another 2 more hours here, this is about to be
Mossberg, you read my mind. Yeah.
sick. And then it ends. Now, some may say, well, that confusion, that's the point, Maddie. That's the whole idea of the game. You're not supposed to really know. You're supposed to be in Senua's shoes. You're supposed to really feel her pain, her confusion, and fair. At the same time, though, I
don't know. That's straight cope, though. It's the same exact thing when people are like, what? I keep bringing up Death Stranding, but like when I said, hey, in Death Stranding, it's kind of tough for me to feel justified in going through all this trouble to save and connect the United States after this apocalypse. It's tough to justify that when I see like 15 people throughout the course of the game. Like you're not seeing villages of people trying to rebuild. You're not seeing anything like that. You just don't. Like you see some holograms of people when you deliver stuff, but that's about it. And people are like, well, Luke, that's because Kojima wanted you to feel the loneliness of a post-apocalypse. So you're supposed to feel like there's no one to save. You're supposed to feel like all this other stuff. And it's like, okay, you came up with an explanation, but it doesn't change the fact that we agreed on at the outset that you're trying to justify, which is that it feels empty and like it's not worth saving. You're saying, well, that's by design. And I'm saying it's a bad design. And same thing with this, where it's like, we can point to all sorts of things like Maddie's bringing up.
That's the whole idea of the game. I'm on board here. If we get like another 2 more hours here, this is about to be sick. And then it ends. Now, some may say, well, that confusion, that's the point, Maddie.
Yeah, the confusion is by design. It's all part of the system. It's part of the equation, dude. It's like, okay, it's a bad equation. They should have changed it. Because you know what? They're making the video game. They can change it if they want. I can't. I'm just the sucker trying to enjoy it. But they can actually alter it. They have the power. Yeah, the game is bad on purpose, bro. Exactly. It's just cope when somebody says, well, yes, it's bad, but there's a reason it's bad. And for you not, like, if you don't acknowledge there's a reason, then you're the problem. And it's like, that's not how that works. That's not how that works. It's like, I don't know for a fact if this happened, but like, you remember in Elden Ring when they broke Melania by accident and they patched it, and so she started healing every time she did an attack, not just when she dealt damage with the attack. So it just like broke the fight. It made the fight like impossible to actually do, unless you were like a god of Soulsborne games. And I would not be surprised if people were like, well, actually, it's always the well, actually types. Well, actually, that's by design because Melania is supposed to be the ultimate challenge at the end of the game. So yes, you basically can't beat her, but that's because she's supposed to be so freaking difficult. It's by design. It's like, bro, you're agreeing with me there's a problem, and then you say, but the reason there's a problem is because of this. So that makes it better. Like, no. Like, if my car gets a flat tire, and then you're like, well, Luke, it got a flat tire because you drove over a nail. I'm like, I agree, but I still have a flat tire. Like, it doesn't change the facts of the situation, you know? Like, what are we doing?
The whole idea of the game. You're not supposed to really know. You're supposed to be in Senua's shoes. You're supposed to really feel her pain, her confusion.
You're supposed to be in Senua's Saga, Hellblade 2.
And fair. At the same time, though, I think Hellblade 1 exists as a perfect example of doing that without totally losing the player. And oftentimes, I found Hellblade 2's story to feel quite aimless, which you just can't afford to have in such a short runtime.
I agree.
As I'm about to hammer home here in many other ways.
I'll
just say that I can't imagine.
Hammer me, Maddie.
Many people are going to be thrilled to wait for a part 3 of Senua's Tale after 5+ years of waiting for Hellblade 2. Just to get to this point, play for a few hours and go, okay, I got to wait another X amount of years for more. It definitely leaves you feeling a little shortchanged. The game's visuals do aid its storytelling capability.
Again, God almighty with the chromatic aberration. Is there like a term for overuse of a particular filter? It's like Instagram photography levels. Like, if you don't know, I keep using the term, so I'll just show you what it actually is. Chromatic aberration, also referred to as chromatic distortion, color fringing, or spherochromatism. Spherochromatism is a common optical phenomenon that occurs when a lens cannot bring all wavelengths of light to a single converging point. In other words, it kind of stretches out like this. So the example that people often bring is like, yeah, here's a good example. Let's just pull this up in a full tab. Okay, so like you see on the one hand, this is a sharp image. It's beautiful, not processed or anything. This is an image with chromatic aberration applied as a separate outside filter. And usually it's not really affecting the center of the frame, and it becomes exaggerated the further out to the edges of the frame you get. That's the effect that they're doing within Hellblade all over the place. And once you see it, you'll never unsee it. So you can see like on the top of his head, he has like crazy color fringing on the top where it washes out all detail. Even for things that are not in focus like this, it still ends up looking significantly worse because it's just super overused. And games use this all the time. And I think it's just a toggle they hit in their engine to be like, oh, look, it's different. So it's better, right? And it drives me up the wall. I think this game would look significantly better if they just removed it, except for very, very specific story sequences. It is overused like mad. But this is kind of one of the things that frustrates me in Hellblade 2 is that they made a lot of choices artistically, I think, just to make something look more quote unquote cinematic. The black bars, the extremely shallow depth of field. And I understand they wanted it to feel cinematic, but sometimes they just don't know when to stop, and it just ends up making it so you're like, this is a cutscene and it looks worse than the gameplay. Like, I can't actually see any detail on his face with his skin because it's so blurred out and the chromatic aberration's way too strong. Like, chill out with those Instagram filters.
I mean, it's basically a 5 to 6 hour movie, so it does the job well. The motion capture is absolutely excellent, as is the acting, the performance.
Like, again, what is in focus here? This? medallion. None of their faces are in focus. I think they actually are technically in focus, but then they go over top with the post-processing filters and it blurs it out. It's crazy.
Here are really good, in my opinion, and can heighten some of the biggest moments in the game. The voices, though, that Senua hears, speaking of Psychosis earlier, in my opinion, are handled worse this time because they're basically like the yellow.
Oh my God, Maddie is just preaching to the choir with this one. He's just every single point, he's just hitting out of the park.
Paint for storytelling, rather than depicting Senua's uncertainty.
Spartans, baby darling, all of these points, if you want me to pull up the individual shots in my own freakishly high bitrate footage, I can do that for you, baby darling. I can do that for you. Because even this shot captured full 4K, captured at a stupid high bitrate that is Hollywood grade with a Ninja 5 Atomos capture card. It's not even really a capture card. It's used for cinema. All of these critiques still apply. Yes, it's less detailed in the YouTube footage, sure. But all of it will still apply to all of my recordings and everything that I've captured itself on the outside. So if you want to keep coping, you can keep coping, but go for it, dude.
The struggles that haunt her. Most times they just point out the obvious during very important cutscenes, and oftentimes are speaking over characters already talking. But that's the point, Maddie. She's experiencing this, and you're feeling it through her shoes. I feel that there is a way to do it right, Hellblade 1, and a way to do it wrong, Hellblade 2. Beyond just having these voices speak over important parts of the story, which to many may be a compelling part of Hellblade 2 because it puts you in Senua's shoes further, for me, it was serving more as a distraction, but perhaps my biggest problem is what I stated earlier, which is the usage of the voices, in particular, pointing you toward various obvious things in the world. You know how all these AAA games have yellow paint all over the place and it just guides you throughout the world? Think of that for storytelling when it comes to the voices Senua hears in her head, which is...
Or Atreus, when Atreus is like, after 5 seconds, look up there. Maybe throw your axe at that and break it. And it's like, bro, what are you doing?
In line with other AAA games where they're telling you where to go, where to climb, who to talk to, what you should do for your next objective. It, to me, misaligns what the original point of the voices in her head were, which was to guide Senua as a character, right? To evolve her character, describe her thoughts, paint a picture of that. Instead here, they're used to, well, guide you to the next step. It's not all the time. Oftentimes her thoughts will develop her character. And it's in those moments that I feel the greatest pain because it's like, we're so close. You have those moments where you're right there, you get it. And then you go back to using it as yellow paint instead of actually enhancing and exposing different parts of Senua's character and the various thoughts she was having. Like, someone would clearly be menacing and the voice would be like, oh, they're evil. They're clearly evil, clearly bad. I'm like, yeah, I can I can tell. He's got his weapon drawn on me. It would just, in those moments, not add to it. Again, this is going to be something I think many people are going to have a problem with because you're not supposed to critique these types of things. But I just think when you look at Hellblade 1, they used it in a much smarter way. To my surprise, Hellblade 2 actually does have a new game plus option that can add a little extra time to your play clock if you're so inclined to double dip. I won't say what it is, but on a second replay, it may add some new wrinkles to the story. It's not enough to save your experience if you're in my shoes, but you may end up liking it a lot if you end up enjoying the main story of Hellblade 2.
Yeah, it's, I guess I could tell you now. Basically, they let you go back through the game again with effectively a new narrator. It's like, okay, cool, but I don't really see it as something that's going to make or break the experience.
Ultimately, I think games like A Plague Tale Requiem are perfect examples of how this style of design from 2017 has been lapped multiple times, might I add. But I think A Plague Tale Requiem is the best example because that was my game of the year in 2022. It's a game that managed to have that cinematic, movie feel. It put all of the story at the forefront, no doubt about it. This relationship between Amicia and Hugo
So
was
good.
literally all it was about. Much of the time in that game is spent walking around, talking, building that relationship. But that relationship never forces you to sacrifice meaningful gameplay, exploration, interaction with the characters in its world. This design was really left behind in the late 2010s, and I think Hellblade 2 is a perfect example of why. It's just been lapped by other games that looked at Hellblade 1 likely and evolved it. To wrap up the story segment before we move on to gameplay, I just want to say that Hellblade 2 does have a lot of great moments throughout. In particular, I think the second half is full of more good moments than bad. As someone who's covered Xbox for the last half a decade, Ninja Theory has always been clear that they wanted to deliver an audiovisual experience. And even if you were looking for answers like how does gameplay move forward, you typically hear something about motion capture, lighting, performance tech, that sort of stuff. You'd never hear about combat, new moves, even the storytelling in a sense. You never really heard much about it. It was always about the audiovisual experience, which Hellblade 1 is famously known for. The problem I have, just to be extremely clear here before we move on from most of our storytelling critiques, is that Hellblade 1 didn't leave behind a ton of its fun factor and also managed to convey its themes and story in a much better manner. And that's why I may sound overly harsh with this game, because the reality is I went in expecting an audiovisual experience, and I did get just that, but I was not prepared for, quite frankly, how boring and disconnected this game would feel, and we'll talk about that now with the gameplay.
Yeah, I think it's also just that specifically I think it's fair to expect some things from games. And at the very least, I think it's fair to expect for a game to do better than its predecessor. So if a game is a sequel, it should be better than the last game that came before it. And if it fails at being better than that, then I lose sympathy. Like at that point, it's like, okay, well, you didn't even upgrade this. You actually made it worse. And that's when you can have a lot of disappointment. I thought there were weird things with Hellblade 2 before it, I got to play it, but I think specifically the fact that it does so many things, in my opinion, worse than it's like the first game from 7 years ago, that makes it really tough to explain away and forgive, in my opinion. Juicebox, another great game I think you're into is Vampire, which doesn't have great gameplay, but the story and dialogue moments carry it anyway. Well, it's a really interesting premise for a game where you're playing this vampire, and the power of your player character is tied to how often you basically feast on blood. So if you want to play the most moral playthrough and not eat people basically through the story, the combat and gameplay is going to be a lot harder than if you choose to just indulge yourself and have basically an evil playthrough, in which case the game becomes a lot easier. It's a really cool concept where basically the gameplay is determined by the moral decisions that you make in the game specifically. And it's a really novel idea. That game at launch, pretty rough around the edges. That was tough to recommend when it came out, but I do think as like a AA game, that one's really impressive. Really, really interesting. I agree.
I don't know how else to put this, but what you're seeing is about the first 40 minutes of Hellblade 2. Yep.
Okay, it took me a second to figure out what he was saying. Just left stick forward. Yep.
Just the analog stick forward, and that is no exaggeration. I know this because whenever I'm recording gameplay, I have my Elgato software up, there's a timer, and when I pressed my first set of buttons for combat in the game, I looked over and went, oh wow, 40 minutes, no breaks, 40 minutes. I was like, okay, wow, almost an hour of gameplay, and I just walked forward the whole time. And that wasn't the only time that would happen in Hellblade 2. The pacing is absolutely dreadful in Hellblade 2. And look, I am a massive JRPG fan. I don't want to hear from one person how I need to be more patient or more understanding. I love these movie types of games. I can totally get behind them, all right? And I have the patience to sit through 90, 100 plus hour games. But when your game is barely crossing the 5-hour mark, you need to go. You need to go much faster than this. I'm not saying I need action constantly, because it's not even that. It's just compelling character interaction, more happening on screen. Most of this game is graphics flexing as you walk through pretty barren but extremely beautiful environments. There's no denying Hellblade 2 is the most beautiful game you can play right now in 2024. It is stunning.
I still think Cyberpunk 2077 is more impressive as a graphical powerhouse, and that's because it's not just beautiful. Like, I think Hellblade 2 is more graphically realistic visually. You know, I think it's more realistic, but I think when you factor in that Cyberpunk 2077 is doing this in an open world, the like path tracing it's capable of, I think that that's almost more impressive. Alan Wake 2 is also very, very impressive, but that has smaller levels, so maybe that's closer to this. But Cyberpunk, it's like, bro, it's up there graphically, and it's fully open world and has amazing gameplay that they're doing as well, you know?
Stunning how good this game looks. But that's also what most of the time in development was spent on, how good the game looks. And it's not because you're walking around and taking in the sights that the pacing is bad. It's because you oftentimes hit puzzles. This is the same gameplay formula you found in Hellblade 1. You would walk around a little bit, you'd hit a puzzle, you'd find some combat, rinse and repeat. How does Hellblade 1 do it better in Hellblade 2? I think things like level design went much further in Hellblade 1 to make it more interesting to explore these locales. Number 2, I think the puzzle segments were, in my experience and in my memory, extremely brief. I think 3, the combat sections and the storytelling sections were much more longer and stretched out, thus leaving a lot more impact. Whereas in Hellblade 2, you get puzzles like this bubble one where you're kind of switching between realities and it's changing the world around you. You just focus on them. There are the same rune puzzles that you'll remember from Hellblade 1 where you have to like focus on these symbols and match them all up.
But again, like I mentioned in my review, you can't really fail these. Like you just can't fail them. In this one that he's showing on screen right now, you have like 3 runes you need to get. And there are 3 places to get the runes. You walk through this doorway around the back, you get the first rune. And then you go back out, you go over to this left side, and then you interact with something, and then you go up there and you get the second rune. Then you walk all the way back over here through that doorway behind the house and up the ladder, and then you get this third rune. You can't fail it. It's just busy work. Like, these puzzles pad gameplay time, without a doubt. There's no interactivity. There's nothing interesting. At least in the first Hellblade, you really had to like look at the pieces floating in the air and figure out, okay, well maybe, oh, I bet I have to stand over there. Then you go over there, stand it, line it up, and it works. In this game, it's just mindless.
Remember from Hellblade 1 where you have to like focus on these symbols and
you're spoiling half the game. Hold up. Yeah, we have talked about the game for more than 10 minutes. We have basically spoiled the whole thing.
match them all up. And this culminates in one of the all-time worst chapters in a video game I've played, Chapter 3 in Hellblade 2, which is like the halfway point of the game, by the way. You are just running around.
Dude, it's so bad.
With a torch, lighting fires for like an hour, and that is it. It is, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but it is like snoozer time gaming. Like, I was struggling to stay awake. I am not like that. Not at all. Like, I take my job very seriously here. I don't want to be disrespectful to developers. I want to do what's best for gaming. I am not like that, man, but this was really bad. And again, you just, in a game this short, you cannot have sections like this. There's moments, games that are much longer need these types of moments to be able to breathe. Like, okay, I need this downtime to solve some puzzles because most of the time I'm fighting. But most of the time in Hellblade 2, you're just wandering and solving puzzles. And the puzzles aren't really good or compelling or convey the game's themes well enough. They just feel like filler.
I agree. It's also like, look how slow Senna is walking here. This is when you're not pushing down left bumper and you're just like barely moving left stick forward. Really cool and cinematic. When I hear that this game took some people 8 hours to get through, this is how fast I imagine they're walking through levels. Otherwise, I have no freaking idea how it could take that long. Like, with this, yeah, that could take you 8 hours to get through. It's like, oh, there's actually an immersive mode, Luke, where you press right bumper and she drops to all fours and crawls slowly through the levels. That's way faster. That not way faster. That's way more immersive. That's how you hit the 8 hour mark. It's like, oh, okay. Gotcha. I muted it. Oops.
Like filler in an already short game. What it led to is me imagining, okay, what if I plucked all of these moments out? By the way, only one of these puzzles I ever got stuck on. But what if I just plucked all of these out. This game's runtime would be cut possibly in half, and I think that's why they exist. They don't exist to serve the game in any meaningful way, just to extend a runtime of an already tragically short video game, which we already knew short was going to be the thing going in, and that was fine with me. It's just that how you use that runtime is everything.
I think it's also, they said 8 hours. I know some people are saying that it's like, some people got 8 hours, some people got 9 hours. Ethan says it took ACG 9 hours. Time is relative. Yeah, maybe somebody's closer to the sun than I am. Like, I get that, but there's only so many things to do in Hellblade, and the only way I could see you taking significantly longer is either if you are only walking and not sprinting. Maybe you're doing it for immersive reasons, whatever. Maybe that's what you're doing. If you're really struggling with the gameplay, or if you played on like very hard and you're dropping dead a bunch and then you're restarting encounters. Because how it works is like, if there's a 10-minute fight, which not really 10, it's probably more like 5. If there's a 5-minute fight and you die 4 minutes into it, you restart it. You don't start at that enemy that you died on. So maybe in that way, some people could have their gameplay time really extended if they got stuck on a combat encounter. I could see that. And then if they got really stuck on puzzles or something, I could see that happening. But like, other than that, like maybe photo mode, I just genuinely don't know. I genuinely don't know how you get it to like 9 hours. I don't get it. I don't know. I don't know. Isn't there a new game plus with more story? I would not say more story. You can basically go back through the game again with another narrator effectively. I mean, the first run through was tedious enough. I'm not sure if you're really, really into the story, like Maddie was saying, if you're really into the story, maybe you get something out of it, but I just don't know. Like for me, I don't generally count New Game Plus as part of the game's runtime. I don't know when I would, because it's New Game Plus. It is a second run through of the game. Like, even for a game like Starfield, where the second run through of the game offers a ton of new stuff that's very novel and unique, I don't think you would count that as part of the runtime of the first playthrough, you know?
And Hellblade 2 does not use its runtime well. This is a bigger shame because the combat in the game, which I have saved for last to talk about, may be mechanically leaner than its previous entry, but I enjoyed the encounters way more. The seemingly endless string of enemies. You finish one and then another steps in, and the way they step in, maybe killing someone else and then squaring up with you. It's seamless. It's beautiful. It's awesome. You combine that with the ramping music, the intensity of barely surviving, no UI. You don't know how much health you have. Some enemies hit harder than others. It's so wonderful, but at the same time, you wonder where the enemy variety is. I mean, this is the same company that made DMC Devil May Cry. I know people hate that game, but I love the combat in it. I get this is a story game, but I think it's inexcusable that the combat has evolved so little in so many years. You have a light attack, a heavy attack, a dodge button, a parry/block button, and you can use your mirror to basically mash through annoying enemies at times, or enemies that you just need to quickly get rid of because you're low on health. Still, I can't lie, like even with less combat mechanics, I really enjoyed the combat in Hellblade 2 because it was about the intensity. You could feel how you were barely hanging on at certain points, and that made it great. I think with some enemy variety in there and a couple of extra moves, I'm talking like maybe 1 or 2 just to target these enemies, we would have something totally different here. But the fact that this combat is used so infrequently does the game a huge disservice. Not because my little action brain needs more stimulation, it's because the combat can be really good, and the moments it shows up, it does enhance what's happening because it feels like it's in synchronization with the story. Unlike the puzzles, unlike the extremely long walking sections, the combat serves a strong purpose in the story. Unfortunately, you can't say the same about the big moments in the game, where I guess you could call them Hellblade 2's boss fights. You really don't fight anything bigger than a singular human. The game's biggest moments are punctuated by walking/running segments. It's, again, a shame because there are bright spots, as I've hoped I've shined a light on, but I know it's mostly been critical, and it's because, unfortunately, as I said in the title, Hellblade 2 left me pretty disappointed. I am really sad to say that because, look, guilty as charged. put a lot of belief into Ninja Theory here. I made the Naughty Dog comparisons. I will own that one every day of the week, but I was completely wrong, clearly, because while this team is a bunch of perfectionists, as I accurately said, I think they were perfectionists in the wrong areas, ultimately leaving a
good way of putting
impact
it.
factor behind, which I know is goal 1 of Hellblade, and they failed on that front. But goal 2 for Hellblade being fun, they missed that mark too. I don't know what the reception publicly is going to be for this game. I expect something polarizing based on my experience. I think some people are really going to love Hellblade 2. I won't lie to you, I can't wrap my head around why, but it's definitely got that feel to it where for some people, this game will just scratch that itch. And if it does, if what I've described sounds like music to your ears, go ahead and try it out. I would still want people to support Hellblade 2. I loved the first game a ton. I love things from Ninja Theory in the past, but
Even that one shot is like cooler than anything we got in Hellblade 2, except for like maybe 1 or 2 moments, which were particularly big. But like that shot is just one of many that you get in Hellblade, the original game. And it's so baffling that
what they've done here with Hellblade 2, I'm not going to depict to you as this tragedy. I know that the emotions are heightened right now by many people watching this video because people want Xbox to get a big win and they need a big win. And this game feels like it had to be it. And I understand all that. But for me, just pulling myself out of that moment, just looking at the game individually, it just doesn't deliver on enough areas that I personally want. And I was left feeling kind of shortchanged with Hellblade 2. Is it still worth like a Game Pass download, you may be wondering? Yeah, I think, again, this is a good weekend game if you want to go ahead and download on Game Pass. But when it comes to the $50 price tag, I'm sorry, just can't say you want to buy this one at full price. When it goes down in price, or if you want to subscribe to Game Pass for it for a month, sure, go ahead. I don't know if that'll help out the studio, as we've already learned here with what's going on with Xbox, but for you as the consumer, that's not really your concern at the end of the day. You're here to know if a game's worth your dollar, and I would say a Game Pass subscription will do. I'm thinking of like Phantom Menace. Game Pass subscription will do. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in.
Yeah, I think it's a really good and fair review. Again, I'll share the link in chats, both on YouTube and Twitch. So go show Maddie some love, go subscribe and everything like that. I just think in general, it's a big old swing and a miss. There are some really weird design choices. And, you know, I hear some people who have previously been like big defenders of Xbox posting stuff like this. You know, in my opinion, we focus so much on what's wrong and not enough on praising what's right. It's like, bro, your job is to appraise games and be critical when needed, not to play cover when a game has obvious flaws. And I understand the desire to be like an optimist and let's just appreciate the good. But here's the thing, like, there's no such thing as optimist dollars when you are in a position where you have, you know, a lot of expendable income, or when you're working in the games industry and so you're getting games for free and stuff. You can easily lose sight of some of the I think some of the value propositions at play. Like I think I don't even know how to phrase what's going on in my brain. I just think like critics need to be critical. Your job as a critic, if that's what you are, is not to play cover for a multi-trillion-dollar company just because parts of your audience like them. Your job is to evaluate a game, and if that upsets your community, that upsets your community. If you honestly don't like a game, your job is to tell people that, and they can take your opinion or leave it. That's fine. Like, at the end of the day, as a critic, your credibility is almost entirely determined and gauged on how accurate your opinions tend to be. Like, if I say that, oh, I think that this game is amazing, and this game's amazing, and this game's amazing, and then you see all of them, and they're actually terrible, then that reviewer will lose credibility, right? In the same way that, like, if somebody is accurately describing something as problematic or bad or that they suck or whatever, and then you try the game and it is actually backed up by that, then they gain credibility with you. And so the sort of social credit tends to have a way of sorting itself out a lot of the time, where people will, like, you know, they'll reveal themselves if they're playing defense for a big company. Then that'll usually reveal itself. But I find it ironic people are critical of critics for being critical. Well, I think it's, to be fair, it is a vocal minority in my opinion. From what I've seen, there are some people that are very outspoken and upset about the critics that are not loving Hellblade 2, for example. In the same way that, like, I got flack when I said I found Horizon Forbidden West to be lacking. I was like, yeah, it's like an 80 out of 100. It's like a B. It's not a masterpiece. It's not amazing. It's just like good or even pretty good, but it's no masterpiece or anything. And people were losing their minds over that. But you look at it and it's like, oh, it's like a couple hundred people who are hardcore, like, fanboys of this franchise, and they feel personally attacked because you're not liking something that they liked. And it's just, it's the danger of tying your personality into a video game, you know. Our Lord and Savior Cult is very critical. Oh. If a critic gets freebies from devs and goes soft on them, then they are shills. Yeah, well, I think that's the impression. Specifically, it's like when you see somebody that is claiming to be a critic. Like, it's fine if you're a popularizer. There's some people who are video game popularizers. Maybe think of somebody like a PewDiePie or a Markiplier or something like that. Nobody's going to Markiplier to, like, hear the latest critique of the upcoming AAA game they're interested in. You're going to Markiplier because he's like a fun guy that plays games and you can find it entertaining. But he's not pretending to be a critic. That's not his job. That's not what he's doing. So you shouldn't expect it from him, right? So if he comes out and he's like, yeah, I got hooked up to try this game early, I'm going to play it, and then let's find the fun in it, you know? That's fine. That's fine. The problem is when somebody that is claiming to be super level and fair and balanced, and I'm going to critique this and analyze it intensely, and then they get, you know, a little kickback, and all of a sudden they're very, very soft on problems that they've critiqued other companies for. That's when I start to lose interest in their opinions. You know, it's the same thing with, like, all the people that are freaking out over, like, I don't know, when people were calling for boycotts of, like, Star Wars Outlaws, for example, when they found out it would require an internet connection to install. And then you look at them and it's like the only game that they play is like Destiny 2 and like GTA Online. And it's like, so you don't have problems with, like, other games that have live service components that do that. And to be fair, Star Wars Outlaws has live service components in the sense that they have, like, an in-game shop and stuff, from what I understand. But still, it's like, okay, if we're fine with it over here because it's a game you like, but for a game over here you don't like, then you're gonna freak out about it, you know? It's like, what are we doing? Yeah, Destiny's my favorite female streamer. Yeah, Destiny's a girl's name. But anyway, all of this to say, I think that this has all been very revealing. I've seen this take is interesting. Don't really care for Hellblade, but criticizing games for being shorter is so anti-art. This mentality of judging games based on cost per hour ratio needs to go. And it's just a screenshot from Hollow's playthrough, because Hollow, when the game went public, posted his full game playthrough. 5 hours, 24 minutes long. That's almost exactly how long my playthrough was, interestingly enough. And Kaida said, 5 hours of gameplay for a AAA game is insane. And to be clear, it's all about value. All of these things are value propositions. If a game like Pong releases at $70 in 2024, it will be viewed as a horrible value proposition, especially because you can basically play it online through your browser and stuff like that. But if that game released 40 years ago, 50 years ago for that price, that would probably be seen as fair because the value proposition was different back then. Nowadays, there are certain standards people expect for AAA money, or in this case, more like AA money since it's $50. And in many, many ways, I would say almost every way, except for graphically. I think Hellblade 2 doesn't meet those standards of quality in gameplay and story and scope and scale and set piece, all of that. It doesn't meet those standards to justify its even AA pricing. I think there's a lot of AAs that are, or AA games that are significantly more a better value for your dollar, basically. Yeah. Sorry if you answered this 100 times, but what's that little castle in the background? It looks sick. Is it Neuschwanstein? Neuschwanstein, maybe. No, it's Hogwarts. Hogwarts Castle. It's the Lego set of Hogwarts Castle. And then that thing behind me is a 3D printed gigantic mansion for a D&D campaign I'm running. It's a whole thing. It's a whole thing. Yeah. Until Dawn also was short, but it had a ton of replay value. Well, and that's the other thing is, as far as I can tell, unless you're really, really into the story of Hellblade 2, I don't know why you would lose your mind over, or I don't know why you'd like the New Game Plus. Like, I don't really see it. But anyway. With all that said, I don't think it is anti-art for a critic to say that something is a bad value. If you're paying $70 and you're only getting 5 hours of content out of it, that is a problem. If you're paying $50 and you're only getting 5 hours of content, that can be a problem. It's, if the quality was so amazing that it's worth that, okay, cool. But if the quality is lackluster and then you're paying $50 to get a lackluster experience, then we have a problem. And it's fair to bring that up. Like, when people are like, it's anti-art and they're just trying to step on critics for being critical of stuff. It's like, okay, well, I we're not going to stop being critical. We're not doing that. It's kind of like literally our job. So, cry me a river. Cry me a river. Make a better game next time. Maybe you should make a better game. Do you prefer playing or DMing in D&D? I mean, it depends on the DM, honestly. Some DMs I've played with are amazing, and I'd much rather play with them than juggle the DM stuff. But I also really enjoy DMing, so it just depends, you know. Let's see. GTA 6 updates? Nope, nothing. King Gator, favorite 40k army? I like Thousand Suns. They're my babies. It's what I started on, so that's my bread and butter. Kuro King, thank you for subbing with Prime. Appreciate you. Mech Warrior, thank you for the 5. If we play Hellblade 2 in Miller's planet close to Gargantua and review it in orbit, playtime will be 35 years. Oh, well, boom. We just solved it. Can you imagine? If, like, yeah, it's about 35 hours. But, sir, it only took me 5 hours to get through. Well, I mean, it's because you're not in orbit around, you know, Gargantua. So it sounds like a you problem. Yeah, get served the most beautiful but disgusting meal. It's art, though. Yeah, and to critique it is anti-food. Yeah, can you imagine? You go to a restaurant, you pay $100, and they bring out like this tiny little whatever. It's like a rice patty with a thing of caviar on it, and then like a drizzle of some sauce, and you pop it in your mouth, and it's really just not very good. And you're like, I paid $100 for this, and it was barely anything. Like, even if it were a lot, I'm not sure if I'd be that thrilled about it, but at least give me a lot for $100. And somebody's like, yeah, well, that's anti-food. Like, what? No, I'm just upset. I just wasted all that money. That's what it is. Thank you for the 5, Caleb. What are your thoughts on 1D&D? Oh, you mean like the unified thing that they've been doing to get all of their platforms tied together? Let me see. 1D&D. So right now, nothing in playtest makes the... Well, wait, what? Is that the 5e unified thing? You might have to explain it to me because I might be thinking of something else. Do you mean like the D&D Beyond thing where they tie all the books together and they don't want to do like new editions of D&D? They want to do just like casual updates and content. Is that what you're referring to? Is that what one D&D is? Is that what that is? I'm trying to see. It's the revisions coming out this year. Oh. Let's see. Backwards compatibility between 1D&D and 5e source books is the aim here, so don't expect an entirely new game system. Though there are still some notable changes, such as the new layer of weapon complexity for martial classes, and overhaul to the druid's wild shape ability, and a near total restructuring of the new Dungeon Master's Guide to make the game more accessible for new DMs. Okay, so it's a new edition that's not a new edition. It's 5.5e. Oh, okay. So my view is if it makes it easier for people to build campaigns and use previously designed source books and source materials, that's all great. I love that. I really hate the way D&D Beyond has done stuff so far, where if you don't know what this is, guys, just so you can see, this is the danger of like one company having all of the power. Is like one D&D and D&D Beyond more specifically, they have this thing where like they have encounter builders and they have campaigns and stuff that you can run. But if you want to use literally anything from any of these books, you have to buy them. Even though these are digital copies of these books that you could buy physically, the physical copy is $60. The digital copy is $30. And when you buy the digital copy, it basically gives you the PDF and then lets you use the stuff that's in the book in your campaign. So you can use like the encounter builder, you can use all of that stuff. But we ran into this just the other day where I'm running a D&D campaign, but we wanted to have everybody build their characters out. However, if you don't own all of these source books, you just can't build your characters properly. Like you have to buy the player's handbook digitally, even if you own it physically, in order to build your character properly with all the necessary stuff. If you're a DM and you want to use like any monster in the monster encounter, you have to go in and like buy the individual books with the enemies that you want. It's like pretty insane. Luckily, there's a lot of free tools like improved initiative and other stuff that can let you bypass it, but it's super toxic. You'd have to spend something insane like $1,200 in order to get all the books to be able to just use like what you would think you could use by default. It's crazy. It's bad. So all told, one D&D as a concept, not terrible, but I really don't like how they've been monetizing the stuff they've been doing. Mech Warrior, thank you for the 5. If we play Hellblade 2 in Miller's, I read that one. Banana Blitz, thank you for the 2. I legit fell asleep when playing Starfield. It's because you were so immersed. That's why. DaVinci Live, 1K viewers on a Wednesday. Luke Stevens takeover. Hell yeah, brother. Lots of the Xbox Hey critical reviews are biased, just someone being a hater. That's literally what a review is. Obviously, it's someone's opinion. Yeah, I think people were so hopeful that this would be a great triumphant day that when it didn't come together, they were very disappointed. And the difference between this and like Redfall, there was no way to defend it. Like, honestly, there was no way to defend it. But at least with like, I think something like a Hellblade 2, there is a way you can defend it. Like, some people will genuinely love it. Some people will really, really like Hellblade 2 and not be joking about it or anything. They'll just be like, yeah, no, I'm totally down. I love it. But I don't get it. Again, it's like they said, I'm sure some people will really, really enjoy Hellblade 2. I don't really know how or why, but I'm sure they will. So there's that. Mostly positive on Steam. Well, it's the same thing with like Suicide Squad. Look up Suicide Squad on Steam. Like all reviews for Suicide Squad are mostly positive. And you might be like, how the hell is that even possible? But it's because the only people that were buying this were buying it for because like they knew this was going to be a game they liked. So the very few people that were buying it knew from the outset that they were going to like it and that this was going to be worth their money. Or at the very least, they were going to say it was worth their money. So same thing with Hellblade. Like I don't take Steam reviews for games that are on Game Pass or games that have very niche followings. I don't take those reviews that seriously as an indicator of broad public perception or quality, just because it's like, by definition, it's built in that it's going to be a very niche group of people reviewing it. So I also expect Hellblade 2, the only people buying it on Steam knew what they were getting into and are okay with it being really short and maybe not having very good gameplay and stuff. So they're going to generally like it, but yeah. 60% discount is insane. Yeah. They're not doing too hot. They're having trouble. Though to be fair, the sales have helped player numbers. They went on sale, went from about 150 players. Now they're at like a 24-hour peak of 341. So they're on their way. The comeback starts, guys. Yeah. Valhalla reception on Steam is insanely good too. Dude. Assassin's Creed Valhalla. AC Valhalla is still at 4,300. And this released like what, 4 years ago? Oh no, it released on Steam like 2 years ago. So this is, I mean, this isn't even close to what peak numbers were at launch. But yeah, they're guesstimating somewhere between like probably 750 and 1 million people actually bought the game on Steam alone. Most of the copies were on console and through Ubisoft Connect. Like, that's crazy. Valhalla is way bigger than people realize. Assassin's Creed in general, a lot of people don't realize how huge it is. Like, it's outrageously big. Assassin's Creed is a massive, massive franchise. So, anywho. So let's see. Yeah, PlayStation layoff, another studio in London. Yeah, they're definitely repositioning just in general. Yeah. My new hero is the Sucks to Suck streamer who cut in front of the E3 line. Oh yeah, that I told you guys about last stream. Yeah, he was just like, I don't know. It's fine if you're a streamer and you have an appointment to get into a game. And so you're like, hey, I'm just going to slide in here. But like, dude, discreetly, like, don't be a prick about it. Because in case you weren't here, basically, like, there was like the big booth for Cyberpunk, and like this is the door, and then this is like the queue line, if you imagine that. And then like here is a Mortal Kombat area and all that. So this was where Mortal Kombat was. Then Ubisoft was over here, and a bunch of other booths were over here. There's this massive, massive building for Cyberpunk. And it's where you would do the like previews if you wanted to see it. And so there were all of these people lined up all in here. And this is like, you know, not scale accurate, but there were just tons of people in here waiting, and people would wait for hours and hours and hours. And it was so freaking toxic too, because there would also be just herds of people over here waiting for the chance to get in and to enter into this line, because you had to wait for the right time. And they only opened it up like every 45 minutes, and then they'd let everyday people in. But if you were a streamer, people would just like cut in front of all of that and enter in here. And if you're going to do that, okay, you got a special badge, you have an appointment, they let you in at 11 a.m. You just get to waltz right in and skip the line and the wait. Okay, cool, good for you. But like this guy was coming along and he's like, yeah, sucks to suck, guys. Yep. Wow, you've had to wait so long. Wow, that's crazy. And they would just go in. It was like, guy, this is just like, that's just mean. That's just nasty. Like, what are we doing? Come on. You know, like everybody knows that you're getting the special, like early access special treatment, but it was just like, it was just slimy. Yeah. Anyway, let's talk about what's number one on trending. Do you guys know what's number one on trending? Anybody know off the top of your head? News Eggman. Anybody know? Plot twist, it was Luke. The whole time it was me. Can you imagine if that's the plot twist? No, unfortunately, it's not the plot twist, but that would have been really, really funny. I wish I had thought of that. That would have been funny. Okay, so number one trending on all of YouTube right now is the story trailer for Elden Ring Shadow of the Erd Tree. Here we are. Story trailer, completely indecipherable. We are so back. Yep, that's most of From Software stuff. Let's see it.
Peggy 16.
Peggy 16. From Software, Bandai Namco.
Mikula the Kind spoke of the beginning. The seduction and the betrayal.
Sticky.
An
Okay.
affair from which gold arose.
Okay.
And so too was Shadow born.
Cool.
What followed was a war unseen.
Oh, baby.
One that could never be put to song. A purge without grace or honor. The tyranny of Messmer's flame.
Yeah, which one is Elden Ring?
And so kindly Mikula would abandon everything. His golden flesh, his blinding strength, even his fate. But we are not deterred. We choose to follow.
Looks like summons are coming back, baby.
Will you walk with us?
Now, what does any of that mean? I have no idea. I have no freaking idea. If we look up the transcript, let's see. Michaela. I'm going to call it Michaela. The kind spoke of the beginning, the seduction and the betrayal, an affair from which gold arose, and so too was shadow born. What followed was a war unseen, one that could never be put to song. A purge without grace or honor, the tyranny of Mesmer's flame, and so kindly Michaela. I just like the idea of just somebody named Michaela just sitting in the background. Was abandoned, or would abandon everything. His golden flesh, his binding strength, even his fate. But we are not deterred. We choose to follow. Will you walk with us? Again, no idea what that means. No clue. No idea. It means what you think it means. More epic boss fights. Yeah, that's the vibe. I mean, even if you look back at like, is there an old Hunters trailer? Expansion DLC trailer. Like, we've probably seen this trailer or played this game. But this is the trailer for it.
Their fiends, their children too. And their children forever true.
Like, they show you how to get to the DLC.
I call to the bloodless wherever they be. Yeah, Bloodborne hits different. Yeah. Man. So in the past, they just did straight gameplay. I think like Dark Souls 3 trailer. No, DLC trailer. So like this, the Ringed City DLC.
That will soon bring the pig bowl of man.
It's just gameplay footage. But to be fair, these are like DLC launch trailers. Was there a DLC story trailer? Did they do one? Announcement trailer, fire fades. Not really. Even the announcement trailers were just gameplay, it looks like. So, like, they're doing cinematic trailers for this, which, like, whatever. We all know the gameplay is going to be really good, so I'm not too worried about it. I know some people freak out because they're like, oh, it's a trailer like gameplay, so therefore it's it's useless. That's true if the gameplay is an unknown quantity. I think in the case of something like a DLC for Elden Ring, one of the most impressive games of the generation, technically it's cross-generation, but you get what I mean. Then it's certainly fair to bring up the gameplay if it's an unknown quantity. But in the case of something like Elden Ring, I think it's like, guys, come on. Like we know they're gonna do a great job. They were smart releasing that trailer after Kai's stream, though that probably wasn't intentional. Yeah, I'm sure it's been scheduled well in advance. You know, Kai, I think, inspired a lot of people to maybe go back in and boot it up again and try it. But then again, I think a lot of people already are playing back through it to prepare for the DLC and get back and familiarized with it, which I encourage you to do
if you have not done it already. Like, you should definitely go and get a feeling for it. That'd be my recommendation. Okay. Isn't the DLC Hellblade price? Just under. It's $40. Finheim. I still consider it useless because I'm going to buy the DLC regardless of the trailer. Yeah, well, I guess there you go. Yeah. Kai convinced a whole generation of yearly sports gamers to try something different. I mean, I honestly, if he inspired people to go and try Elden Ring who'd never tried it before, that's awesome. You know, I welcome it. We need more big streamers like that tend to stay in a very specific niche. We need more of them to try games like that because they'll try it and they're going to fall in love with it, no doubt. Yeah. No doubt. Yeah. Whitest Rabbit, you caught up. Yay. There we go. Let's touch on this real quick. Ken Levine did an interview on Judas. Oh God. Show transcript. Hold on. I'm gonna look up when he mentions Lego. Yeah. News segment. So this guy is the one making Judas. This is the guy behind like BioShock Infinite and all of that. And my frustration with Judas so far has just been that they can't really clearly describe what's going on with it. Like what makes it really click. Like what is this narrative Lego thing? They're always like, well, you can kind of put pieces of the story together in a unique way to make it a unique story for you. I'm like, so like a Detroit Become Human type of thing, or like a standard narrative RPG? Like what is this doing that's so novel and unique? Because it's giving me vibes of like Kojima, when Kojima was saying that Death Stranding was a new genre of game. And it's like, you mean like the FedEx delivery simulator, that new genre? Interesting. So maybe here he can explain it a little better.
Exciting, especially if you're a fan of those old games too, because it just harkens back to those good feelings. Talk to me a little bit. I know you've kind of talked a lot about this. I mean, I think you first talked about this at GDC like 10 years ago, but the whole narrative blocks, the Lego blocks, whatever. BioShock and BioShock Infinite had their set of choices, I guess. And will you harvest the little sister? Will you hack the machine? Will you do this little side thing? Will you play the guitar? Whatever. But obviously nothing like this. And I'm wondering, this must have been a major complexity for you guys, especially as a small team, to have to. I always thought about it through the lens of Quantic Dream, right? Heavy Rain, those kinds of games where I'm like, damn, dude. Or Detroit was a big one when you actually could visualize the butterfly effect. And I'm like, this is impressive. You know, I imagine that it's been quite the feat to get this all together for you guys.
Again, I don't think anybody really clearly understands what he means when he says narrative Lego, because when you bring up comparisons like Detroit Become Human, which we all know and understand, he kind of walks around it and dances around it a little bit. So I feel like what they're doing in Judas is different, but I still don't know what they're doing. You know, it's like, and it gets me weirded out when the guy that's spent a decade building this game can't clearly describe what it even is. You know, that weirds me out. And maybe it's just because it's so novel and so crazy, we just can't fathom it yet, or it's hard to describe. But still, I would expect there to be a clear answer. So maybe here he's going to finally explain it. And today will be the day I finally see what he means.
Yeah, there was about 5 years of just figuring out the basics of what they, we sort of built a piece of technology on top of the Unreal Engine, which was this Lego system, which pretty much there are the opening of the game is fairly linear. Then about an hour and a half in, it completely opens up and you can sort of navigate the surface of the ship, go where you want to go, do the missions you want to do, interact with the characters you want to interact with. But to make that work, I had to sort of conceive this idea of the Legos where you would build the metaphor is, for those who don't know, I did this talk. You can probably link to it. But the metaphor is that, with Legos, the craftsmen in Denmark or wherever they are sort of create with Lego, they create a bunch of bricks, right? A bunch of primitives essentially. And you then can take those primitives, and I don't know, back when I was a kid, they had like 30 of them, maybe not even that, maybe they had 20 or something of them. But the amount of stuff you can build with those handcrafted elements was, exponentially huge. And I was like, well, given the challenges like the games industry is facing, and having done a bunch of these very linear games that where each moment was sort of a one-off, could you build and one-off's really cool because you do really bespoke moments, but they're the same for everybody. Mm-hmm. Could you build a sort of modular set and teach the system how to build cool stuff out of the various Legos? And the Lego may be a line of pre-recorded speech with an actor. It may be, that can be mixed and matched with other lines of speech that are recorded separately, but don't necessarily go together by design. They're not one-offs that go together. A room that gets decorated with different objects and textured differently and lit differently and different encounters depending upon where the player is. Because, I think I know we talked about this, but I got frustrated during Infinite because I had this stupid idea. Stupid because not that it was a bad idea, but it was way too late in the day to think of it. Like, I wish Elizabeth could have been reacted to Booker because she talks a lot about his violence. But I was like, oh, it'd be great if she could just get fed up with how violent he is and bail on him. And I'm like, then people kind of looked at me and I was like, oh God, we don't have any tool to make that happen. The game can't heal itself. So basically almost, we had the Big Daddy and Little Sisters in BioShock, so there was a choice there. It was fairly marginal. It was cool, but it wasn't like you were, could be like, oh, screw this Atlas guy. I'm going to go off and work for Andrew Ryan. Right. When that happened, when things like that change, that was the game telling you that it was changing. Or Elizabeth walking away from you, right? Getting mad at you and saying, fuck you, I'm done. And I really was like, okay, I want to do that stuff. And I really failed to do that on previous games, but I also knew that it was going to take a lot of thinking and a lot of time to figure out how you would actually build the tool set to do that.
So what he just used as examples are things he gave as examples when he met with Jeff Keighley and then the Friends Per Second podcast and let them try the game early. And it was specifically based on your decisions and actions in the game. What if we could do things like have a line of dialogue play, which is one of those narrative Lego, and have it play somewhere where it wouldn't play otherwise or in that context, but it only plays there because of something you did? Or could we light a room differently or texture it differently or put a different encounter there? I don't understand how that's different than what almost all of these other games already do. Like, most RPGs will have it. So like, oh, you chose to do this and now this character left it. Like The Witcher 3, if you try to seduce both Yennefer and Triss, they find out and they both leave you. They're just like, bye. It's like what he's describing are regular traits of branching narrative games or RPGs. So if this is just a first-person shooter with more RPG mechanics, cool. Why are we pretending like this is some sort of groundbreaking thing that he spent 5 years building from the ground up? I'm like, everything I know about what he's describing are things that could happen in any other RPG effectively. It's like, oh yeah, you chose to do something here, so the posters in the room will change. Okay. Cool. Like, what's the big deal though? Like, I just don't understand what the big hook is, I think he means non-scripted. Well, so here he's describing how he wants the systems to be dynamic. He uses the term like the game has to be able to heal itself, which is an interesting sort of idea where it's like the player could break the game in a certain way by choosing to do something just outrageous, maybe killing off one of these characters or doing this or doing that. And then how does the game adapt to that? Does the game heal itself, quote unquote. Cool concept, cool idea. But again, how is that any different from what just a regular RPG would do? You could say it's not scripted, it's purely dynamic, so it's totally free form, which I think is more what he's trying to describe. So let's MS Paint this. Maybe I can like sort through my thoughts a little clearer. So if we imagine like an RPG might work like this, where you have one starting branch, then it splits off and it splits off and it splits off, and eventually you just get, you know, a whole tree, and maybe they cross over each other and they go different ways, but there's all sorts of branches that come off of it. And by the time you get to the end, there are a ton of different paths that could have occurred all along the way based on your decisions, right? And that's how typically you would think of an RPG working, is that you can kind of choose your own adventure and things will happen, but ultimately you're following along the same paths that everyone else has the chance to follow along with. You just are getting to choose which one of these paths you go. So like if you want to go this route, boom, you had one experience with the game. Or you go through this route, cool, maybe you go this way and then you go here and then split off that way. Cool, you had a different experience. But it's all just branching stuff within an RPG, right? What I think he's trying to describe is a system that is wholly dynamic, so it doesn't work the same way as this. What he wants are a bunch of individual little blocks that are kind of free floating in space that the engine can take and use. And then with the individual little blocks, it can rearrange them where like the first block will be the same for everybody. And then they can use the engine to move the blocks into a different order so you have a different experience than someone else. And the way they're doing it is by basically picking from this group and sliding them in based on actions that you perform. And in that way, you are building your own little narrative, right? That's the idea. And then some blocks won't be used for your story and your adventure. Others will be, and so everybody should have a unique thing. My question is just how this is ultimately different than what's happening over here. Because it seems like this is just a far more complicated way of achieving this. And if it's just a more complicated way of achieving that, that's indistinguishable from this, it's because it's more complicated, it probably ends up being worse. Because typically in games, when things get overly complicated, things get chaotic and break, and there's all sorts of other problems. But even then, like, even if it is just the same, it'll just feel like an RPG, but an RPG that spent 10 years to build and was put together in a way more complicated way. So my question is, what is achievable with the free floating way of doing it with individual blocks instead of kind of pre-designed pathways? What can be done here that's so unique from the effect that you'll have here? Because the designer, the game developer, knows that this pathway has been specifically calibrated and designed with these players' choices in mind, right? The game designer knows that. The player doesn't necessarily know that when they do X, it will have Y consequence. So for the player, the impression could be the exact same between these two ways of doing it. And so far, I haven't really heard anything described that couldn't be achieved through just traditional RPG design means. Like, everything that he's described is like, well, you can have a different encounter based on something you did in the game. Okay, that's true of many, many games today. So like, what is this specific thing or things that this game can do that no other game can do? And I just haven't heard anything, you know? Yeah, the end result, Andrew looks like a conspiracy board. Yeah, I'm like, you guys just need to think about this way. Yeah, basically.
It's funny because I was reading in, I think it was Ryan's piece. I told you last time we talked, I think that I have this theory that these games are connected to the BioShock games, but you confirmed that they're not, right? Like this is a standalone product on its own, right?
I mean, they're only connected in this fact that I worked on both of them,
right?
And it's weird to be thinking about, different IPs because they are, I'm a particular person making games with a team, and we're going to bring some of our instincts from, we're not going to we don't flesh out all of our instincts and all of our creative impulses, between products, but it's not a BioShock game in any way, shape, or form.
It's funny, man. I also hate.
I mean, in many ways, shapes and forms, it certainly appears to be very BioShocky. I mean, like we look at the gameplay footage they put up, and it's like he's even said, yeah, in terms of gameplay, it'll probably feel very similar to BioShock because you have the gun in the right hand, and then you have the sort of magical tech effect in the left hand. It's like in terms of actual gameplay, it probably will feel very BioShock-like, but we're being pedantic.
The question, I hate even asking it, simply because if I were you, I would want that to be secret anyway, so I would just lie about it anyway. Like if that was. Now, let me ask you as a creative, was there
You're a liar.
any feeling that you would want to connect them, or did you know from the very beginning that you were just saying like this is gonna be its own thing? There's no.
See, and it drives me crazy how quickly people just pivot off of it. Like he really didn't say much of anything in there that explained what's so unique about the narrative Lego. It's just, but people give up on pushing him on it so quickly. So he describes really cool bespoke moments, but they're basically the same for everybody. You could build a sort of modular set and teach the system how to build cool stuff.
Build a sort of modular set and teach the system how to build cool stuff out of the various Legos. And the Lego may be a line of pre-recorded speech with an actor. It may be, that can be mixed and matched with other lines of speech that are recorded separately, but don't necessarily go together.
Okay, so that as an example, say you screw over one of the three characters you're going to be interacting with. You betray them and start helping somebody else. Okay, then this system takes some different lines of dialogue and has that character tell you in a mini conversation they have with you saying, I really didn't appreciate when you screwed me over like that. And then it attaches another piece of dialogue to go and help the sheriff who I don't trust. And then they attach another line of dialogue. And I know you may have been well-intentioned by doing it in the movie theater, but I'm not putting up with any of it. It's like, okay, it's just a more dynamic or a slightly more detailed way of doing a typical RPG system, right? Like that example doesn't sound that crazy or groundbreaking,
By design, they're not one-offs that go together. A room that gets decorated with different objects and texture differently and lit differently.
So he describes texturing it differently, lighting differently. Like they showed that in the little thing they did. Okay. Cool. Maybe it's more like Duplo than Lego. I think you might actually be onto something there. Like, again, my point with all this, just to be clear, like, we're not trying to just nitpick for funsies. My point is, if you can't tell the difference between option A, let's just go, can I just go, like, okay, if you can't tell the difference between these two designs, okay, so this is A and this is B. One is taking, obviously, much more effort to put together. B is way more complicated. They have the system where the computer is teaching itself to build stories out of narrative blocks that could be dialogue, or it could be, a combat encounter happens that wouldn't have happened otherwise, or would have happened somewhere else. And it's, it's taking all these pieces to put together a custom experience for the player. If the player can't tell the difference between that and a traditional RPG system where you're making some choices and then it changes the outcome for you, what is the benefit of doing B other than that it takes a decade to make that game versus this game taking 4 or 5 years? Like, I don't understand what's the hook that makes this so special. Is it that it's just more specific? They can pull lines of dialogue to specifically mention that you did this in this place at this time, whereas in this case, it'll be a little bit more vague. Okay. I don't really find that to be like ground shaking, but maybe that is enough for it to be cool. Maybe. I don't know. Banana, I do have a tablet over there. I could use it. I could use it. It's just every time I just want to quickly draw something, I'm like, yeah, see, it's just this and this and this. But yeah, anyway, I'll let him keep talking and then I'll plug it in. Let's see, Lego, my ego. Narrative blocks, whatever. BioShock, 1640, the build metaphor. The Legos, Craftsman in Denmark. We read or heard that part. 17, line of pre-recorded speech. Yeah, that's the only time he talks about narrative Lego in the entire game. Does he bring up RPGs?
And then RPGs are dead, right? And
Right.
Baldur's Gate. And the truth is that I don't think things die. People discover new expressions of them. Some things die, right? Like, I don't know, is the lute ever going to come back as a huge, instrument? I don't know. Maybe not. But everything, I'm old enough to know that things you thought were permanent in the universe. Like, I remember as a kid, I was like, oh, there's always going to be Sears, right?
Right.
And you never thought that Sears wouldn't exist. And of course, Sears eventually would go. Everything will eventually go, and you have to become comfortable with that. Things come and go. As you get older, you start seeing things coming and going. But as a creative person, like, I don't have a huge illusion about myself as a great artist, creative person. Like, I am a guy who's incredibly lucky that I get to make goofy shit that people are willing to pay for and people are willing to pay me for. And I will find a way to make cool, goofy shit, hopefully in a way that people will pay me for, until they drag me out. But AI, for me right now, at least as it stands, is an incredibly powerful tool for like QA, like analytics are something we do a lot of on Judas. Like, we basically, when we test the game's constant. I don't want to bore your audience. If any of this sounds
this is not going to be boring to the audience at all. Okay. I promise you.
So analytics are a major tool for us, where basically the game creates a massive amount of data when the testers play it about every weapon they picked up, every monster that spawns, because the game is so divergent that we have no way of it's not like BioShock where you're like, okay, well, where were they in the level? Because there is no level in our game, right? It's all being constructed out of these smaller pieces at runtime. I mean, I call it pseudo procedural is the term I use, not procedural, but pseudo procedural. That is taking these individual bricks that we've handcrafted, whether that's speech or encounters or enemies, and it's we've taught the rules to make good encounters and good environments and good experiences, and it's sort of constructing it at runtime. But in order to understand what's happening in the game, we use a massive amount of analytics. So, like, I find the value of AI is building an open-ended parser for, like, hey, instead of like using a complex series of tools, just type in, train the AI on the data of all this analytics, which is a massive, insane amount of data that no human could parse, and say, hey, show me how many times did people use the pistol while fighting this enemy while they were jumping in the air, right? You could, an open-ended query.
Right.
And then the AI trained on the data set could come back and tell you that without having to have any set of special tools. That's really useful. The bug database, querying the bug database, because anytime you have a massive set of data, the AI is incredibly useful, unless it's hallucinating, which does happen, which I'm not sure that's a tractable problem. That may be an intractable problem given the nature of large language models. But I don't see it we don't use it at all for like purely creative purposes at this time. It's not, I don't think it's particularly good at it yet.
Yeah, it's funny.
It's interesting to bring up to him AI stuff. That's interesting. But I mean, even that example that he just gave with it is, I got the tablet. I'm not used to using it, but ooh, yay. But even this, like, that sounds much more interesting when he's like, yeah, it's pseudo procedural. The whole thing will be constructed totally independent of all of this. I think the best way to sell this game probably is going to be to like have two people play it and then go in and like show these two players only shared 12% of the same stuff as they went through the game. Their experience was that different because it was so divergent and so unique in how it was built out by these dynamic systems. That I think could be really interesting to people. It's like, wow, my experience is going to be that unique. Interesting. I like that. Even 50%, exactly, Jake. 50% could be cool. Or if it's like, hey, these two players decided they wanted to try both siding with this character, but they did it in different ways. And they shared 70% of the same encounters. But because it made smaller choices and did things slightly differently, the game shifted in that way. That could be something really, really cool. But it's going to be, I think, if you want people to get sold on this really novel idea or novel way of doing things, they're going to have to find a different way of selling it than just saying narrative Lego, because nobody really knows what that means. And even now, like, I feel like it requires speculation to decipher or to come up with useful ideas of what it means. Again, could be really cool, but I just don't know what that hook is yet. But I'm sure we'll find out as they show it more. I'm sure. Okay. 99% of players have different experience. Well, it's why you'd have to know. It's why you'd have to know what, like, how they were coming up with these stats, because you could technically say, like, Elden Ring, everyone has had a totally unique experience in Elden Ring, and it's like, how did you quantify that? Like, we all fought the same bosses. It's like, yeah, but you had different stuff in your inventory and your stats were slightly different. Yes, this person had 45 strength, you had 44. And you used your flask of healing within the first 2 minutes. The other guy waited 2 minutes and 4 seconds. And it's like, okay, I guess technically we all had a unique experience if we're being hyper precise about it. But that's not what people think when you say they had totally unique experiences, right? Like, that's not what that means. What I would be hopeful for is that they could show, like, no, look, totally different arenas, different fights and encounters, a different ending, different places you saw, different people you met. That stuff could be really, really interesting. But again, we don't know what the deal is. Lol, it's just System Shock. Every data point just makes it sound more and more like System Shock. It is funny how he keeps being like, it's not BioShock. It's not BioShock. It's not System Shock. It's something totally new. But the more he describes it, it's like this just is starting to sound like BioShock or System Shock. Or, you know, it's like, yeah, it seems like I don't think you're actually getting that far away from it. It's a little funny. It's a little funny. Oh man. Judas Shock. Yeah, they announced they renamed it. We found this name to be more immersive. It better reflected our narrative Lego that we decided to use. Oh. Interesting. Oh. Bio Judas. That could work. Or just Shock. Oh yeah, you just call it Shock. Man, there's so many good options. They should hire us. They should hire us. We know what we're doing. We know what we're doing. Oh, I did see this. I wanted to bring this up. I saw this article pop up on Twitter, X, whatever. And I wanted to bring it up. It's a study from the Quantic Foundry. Ooh. From Nick Yee. And in it, the basic breakdown of the article, gamers have become less interested in strategic thinking and planning. Huh. In our blog post, we've focused a lot on demographic cohort comparisons and how motivations are linked to in-game preferences, usually using slices of contemporaneous survey data. But because we've been collecting data from our gamer motivation profile for about 9 years, we can also explore how gaming motivations have changed over a long period of time. In this blog post, we'll deep dive into a long-term trend we've uncovered. Over the past 9 years, gamers have become less interested in strategic thinking and planning. Huh. Okay. It's probably based on Americans, not gonna lie. Yeah. So they break down some stuff. So for one, they use the data from 1.57 million gamers who participated in the profile between June 2015 and April of 2024. Respondents from China were excluded because respondents from China were excluded because gamers in China have a very different gaming motivation profile, likely due to the historically more isolated development of their games industry, which makes sense. Like if it's going to skew the data significantly, then okay. So they did that. They said the motivation model strategy is defined as the appeal of long-term thinking, planning, and careful decision-making. Gamers who score high on strategy prefer longer time horizons for planning and complex decision-making with many underlying parameters to consider, all the branching decisions and likely outcomes seen in games like Europa Universalis and Total War. Gamers who score low on strategy prefer more reactive and spontaneous gameplay and simple decision-making with few underlying parameters to consider, such as in games like Just Dance and Animal Crossing. A good metaphor for strategy is the size of the whiteboard in your mind that each decision is taking to map out, think through, and optimize. So in Animal Crossing, it's like, oh, do I want to place this tree here and plant this tree here? Sure. That's a good place for a tree, and that's it. Whereas in a game like Total War, if you're like, where should I place this unit, factoring in that this army is going to push in this way and this is going to happen in that way, or I'm going to build this here and this is all going to like, you got to think very far ahead. Interesting. So using the starting norm, i.e. the 50th percentile, as a basis for comparison, the strategy score has declined to 33rd percentile as of April 2024. Or put more plainly, 67% of gamers today care less about strategic thinking and planning when playing games compared to the average gamer in 2015. Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty clear trend. Oof. Both percentiles and psychometrics are fairly abstract concepts, and the magnitude of a drop to 33rd percentile can be difficult to grok. To help anchor this finding, here are some real-world magnitude equivalents using more familiar metrics. It's the equivalent of all men aged 20 plus in the US losing 17 pounds in weight. It's the equivalent of all men worldwide losing 1.34 inches in height, or it's the equivalent of everyone worldwide losing about 6.75 points of IQ. In other words, it's about the same as if you listened to Jojo Siwa's Karma 3 times within 10 minutes. It's about the same psychological effect as you would see there. Gradual persistent decline that predates COVID. When we initially had an inkling that strategy had declined, we suspected that it was potentially due to COVID and avoiding anxiety related to thinking about the future. Oh, that's an interesting concept. When we conducted the longitudinal analysis, several things stood out. The decline in strategy clearly predates COVID. It is noticeable from the earliest data collection periods, and the trend line suggests it started before June 2015. The trend line also makes clear that what we're observing is a gradual but very persistent long-term downward trend in strategy. Whatever the cause, it's likely not a sudden single historical event, but part of a larger long-term cultural and psychological shift. And the downward trend slowed down prior to COVID, right before January 2020, regained traction during the COVID era, and then has slowed down since COVID restrictions have been lifted. So there is a potential argument to be made that COVID exacerbated or prolonged an ongoing trend. Interesting. The decline is equal or identical for both men and women, so it's affecting everybody. The decline is similar whether we're looking at the US or non-US gamers. It's hitting everybody the same. And then they try to describe why it might be happening. There are many seemingly related findings in terms of our media consumption habits. My knee-jerk reaction is one of the other trends that's happened during the same time period is that short form content has been on the rise significantly, and it feels like the attention spans of gamers in general, and also people just in general, has also been shrinking. So it used to be the case that you could post maybe a video that had a lot less editing and a lot flashier or a lot less flashy editing and stuff. But now if you're going to post a video, you have to keep it moving super, super quick. You can't have any lulls or slowdowns. Otherwise people click away. It seems like people's tolerance for that type of thing is much lower than it used to be. So my knee-jerk reaction is, okay, it's because of the rise of social media stuff. Maybe in the lead up, like it was starting to slow down in late 2018, 19, 20. And then COVID hit, everybody's staying home. Everyone's on TikTok all the time. Everybody's watching YouTube videos, all that stuff. Like that seems to me like it could have been part of the push. Let's see. There are seemingly related findings in terms of our media consumption habits. For example, over time, shorter YouTube videos have garnered a higher share of overall views. Exactly. The duration of shots in movies, i.e. between each cut, has decreased from 16 seconds in 1930 to 4 seconds in 2010. The average time spent on a computer app window, such as on a Word doc before switching to a browser window, has decreased from 2.5 minutes in 2004 to 47 seconds in 2016. In this light, the decline in strategy is likely not an idiosyncratic phenomenon among digital gamers, but parallels the general reduction in attention spans observed by researchers in different fields. But because all over time comparisons are inherently correlational, it's difficult to pin down cause and effect. While we often blame social media for our decreased attention spans, there's a lack of concrete causal evidence for this, or causal, not casual. Causal evidence for this. Of course, it bears pointing out that causal evidence for this would be difficult to produce since it's unethical to raise children in artificial labs. Also, the shot duration analysis in movies is a counterpoint to blaming social media entirely. This downward trend in media attention span can be traced as far back as the 1930s, although it is certainly possible that social media has accelerated the underlying trend. It could also just be that social media has shorter attention spans because that's what people have been trending towards. So the social media has just adapted to what's happening in general with people. And then you got to ask, well, why is that happening? It could just be that we are so oversaturated with content and entertainment in general that our attention spans drop, maybe, but I don't know. Another potential hypothesis is that increasing negativity, polarization, intrusiveness, and emotional manipulation in social media has created a persistent cognitive overload on the finite cognitive resources we have. Put simply, we may be too worn out by social media to think deeply about things. For example, higher engagement with social media is correlated with lower math and reading scores and poorer mental health among teenagers. Of course, again, these findings are correlational and not direct causal evidence. I mean, this is pretty telling. Like, the stats are pretty clear. Higher engagement with social media leads to lower math, reading, and science scores. So if somebody is really like terminally online in high school, their stats are going to drop significantly, which is pretty telling. I mean, I think we've all seen it. Like some people, I'm always just shocked. Some people, you'll hear something like you're like, how on earth are you an adult? Like, the best example I can immediately think of was like of a streamer specifically was this. Some of you guys might know what this is.
Dig to get to the ocean. I was laying in my bed last night thinking about that, bro. How deep do I have to dig to get to the ocean? I was laying in my bed last night thinking about that, bro. Like, if I just like took a shovel and I just started to dig into my grass, I wonder when I'd hit the ocean, bro. I'm stupid. Guys, what are you talking about? Dude, the panhandle is like right next to the ocean, bro. So if I dig like 5 feet, I may see the ocean. You know what I'm saying? Tim, that's not how that works. What? The ocean is under the ground, bro, right? What are you guys talking about, bro? Chat, dude, listen. No? Dude, no, I'm serious. Like, Hawaii. If you're on Hawaii and if someone dug 500 feet, I don't know how far they gotta go, but eventually you could hit the ocean, right? No? Yo, pause for a second, bro. What are you guys saying to me? Hang on, I'm serious, bro. What? Wait, guys, dude, do I think islands are floating? Sort of. The Earth's core is down
Sort
there,
of.
bro. Don't homeschool your kids, bro. Because, I mean, if you're smart, do it. But, I mean, my parents, you know. How deep?
So, like, when I hear a grown man, a multimillionaire, saying something like that, like, I think Tim is probably, you know, in general, a smart guy. It's just, it's really funny to hear an adult describe how he thinks if he digs in his front yard, if he goes deep enough, he'll hit the ocean. Like, when we're kids, we're always like, oh, I'm just going to dig in the backyard and eventually, you know, I'll pop out the other side of the earth. And then we turn 5 years old and we realize that's not how that works. But sometimes you end up with people that grow up fully and end up with that. And a lot of streamers, to be fair, I've seen a lot of streamers, especially young ones, where you're like, dudes, like, I get that you're a streamer now, you're a multimillionaire, so you're fine. Like, you don't really need the education to be successful in life, I guess. But it's like, how did you even get this far? You know, like, what is happening? So I don't know. In general, this is a really, really fascinating article. I mean, it's interesting. Implications for making games and understanding games, even if the underlying causes cannot be identified. It's clear that gamers have become less interested in strategic thinking over the past 9 years. It implies that gamers are now more easily cognitively overloaded when they play games and are more likely to avoid strategic complexity. This has implications, Jesus, for game design and marketing. Overall, gamers now prefer shorter time horizons to plan for, the number of steps and branching outcomes they have to think through, and less complex decisions that rely on fewer parameters to consider. And for those of us who study gamers, typically in the more confined context of specific game titles and franchises, this finding may help explain observed changes among strategy-related player segments over the past decade that we would otherwise have more likely attributed to game feature changes or COVID. Seems like people are just specifically changing. I'll put this in chat if you guys want to go check out the article yourself. But I think it's really, really interesting as just a concept. But it also explains a lot of other things. I mean, it also just generally explains why games seem to be hyper dumbed down. Let me see. So like this went viral at one point because some people caught during this gameplay design speech at GDC when they were describing how they built these games. They at one point show a player, a streamer, trying to work through a level. Let me see if I can find the clip. And they tried to bring it up. Where is it? They tried to bring it up as an example of the modern player, the modern gamer. And they said that they went on and they tested it and were looking at these player reactions to gauge how well a level design was working. Let me see if I can find the... Is this it? I think this is it.
Here's a quick example.
Yeah. And I'll show you who this guy actually is. The fact that they're using this as the way they're designing levels. I'll show you who this guy is here in a second. They blurred him out here, but I'll show you who this is in a second.
I want you to watch what the player does here.
Because you've seen clips of him, and he's well known for being one of the worst gamers that does this for a living.
As he boats around.
Taste of Vanya magic led him to new forms of experimentation.
We're back.
New levels of depravity.
Look where we are. We're back.
Okay, so in this example, the player is exploring the hub. They've been correctly taught the shock arrow mechanic. And thanks to the design work done by Kai Zheng, they've also been told that shock arrows mean interesting themes and that there's a lot of different variety and a lot of different gameplay, right? So we've made a convincing promise to the player. So watch it one more time, and I want you to watch just what the camera behavior does.
The taste of Vanya magic led him to new forms of experimentation.
We're back.
New levels of depravity.
Look where we are. We're back.
Boom, and there it is. He saw a shock crystal, right? He has been taught correctly. He has been promised interesting gameplay.
I like how they describe him like he's a mouse, like a rat in a lab. He has been taught the behavior properly. He has learned. Yeah, and then there's this. This is one of the clips of DSP trying to play I think Tears of the Kingdom, but this is an Asmongold clip of it.
Doesn't work. Hold R, press up, release. Nope. Still brings out the arrows. Still brings out the arrows. Press R. Nope. Press regular R. Hold up, release. Oh, is that it? Is that all I had to do?
The other one is DSP and Lightning. Where is yeah, this is great. Maybe unequip that stuff.
You're kidding me. Riding full speed, the lightning hones in on you and it hits you.
The lightning's faster than my horse. What is this BS?
You see, this isn't fun. I'm sorry. Randomly, a glue monster appears, takes all of your health. Oh, you don't have enough stamina to climb something standard at the beginning of the game. Oh, lightning just hones in on you and then kills you. How is this a fun? It's bullshit.
Bruh, just unequip the metal armor so you don't get hit by the lightning. It literally tells you that you're about to get shocked. Plus, you can see the weather in the corner saying that there's a lightning storm happening.
Yeah. Like, it's genuinely shocking. See what I did there? But I mean, again, that's the trend. Those are the stats that these designers are looking at when they're designing these games. That's why a lot of these games feel like they're getting dumbed down, because it's like, well, yeah, I mean, the games are being built to the lowest common denominator, unfortunately. And I think on the one hand, it's good because, like, Baldur's Gate 3, for example, is unapologetically, I think it revels in its complexities and it doesn't try to dumb anything down. And that was received remarkably well. And I think it's because when some people, or maybe the mass market, likes it dumbed down a little bit, but if you provide something with more depth, it will generally be reviewed better and people will appreciate it much, much more. Yeah, oh no, built for DSP. I mean, basically, yeah. No, Joe Raptor, he said that he is booked up today, so we will not be doing the Free Roam podcast today. We are trying to figure out the scheduling for it, but he had something come up today that he needed to do. So anyway, but that's kind of the deal. That's kind of the deal with all of that stuff. It's pretty dumb. critical thinking's an acquired skill. I mean, some people are just like, actually, I think something might be wrong. But maybe that's dismissive of me. Ethan, I have my first real job interview tomorrow. Any advice? I mean, they are going to ask you if you have any questions for them. One of the like strats that a business professor told me was, he was like, always ask them a question that makes them think of you in the role. So you ask something like, when at the end of the interview, it's gone pretty well, they ask you, do you have any other questions for me? Anything before we go? You ask them something like, let's say I get the job and I start and I walk in, I sit down at the desk and I'm reporting to you, or I'm reporting to another boss. What would my day-to-day be like when I would work here? Like, what would I actually be doing if I came into the office? And, you know, you just try to paint the picture kind of sneakily in the question of you having the job and being present there, interacting with that person and with the rest of the company. And that makes them think of you not just as like a candidate or an applicant or an interviewee. That makes them think of you as somebody who actually could work there. It's like a coy way of doing it, but it's something I tried with my job when I was applying for that corporate real estate or commercial real estate brokerage position, and it worked for that. So I would say just try to help them picture you in the role. Yeah, what would I do on a day-to-day? Like, let's say I get the job, I'm reporting to you, I come in, sit down at the desk or whatever the job is. What am I going to be doing on a day-to-day? What would my day-to-day look like working here? Just a little something like that. Because it'll just make them think, okay, if they were working here, if they were my employee and we were working together, and that right there will make you much more likely to enter into a serious thought process when they're trying to decide who to hire. Or it might be a total disaster. I don't know. I mean, we'll see. Like, hey, I like this guy coming across the desk from me on a daily basis. I like his attitude. I like who he is. Yeah, you just get the gears turning. Get the gears turning. Have you seen Suicide Squad numbers are growing slightly again? Yeah, they went up about, I mean, they basically doubled from 150 players to 300. But, I mean, that's still not quite enough. So, I mean, you would expect player numbers to rise when you put it on like 60% off. It better rise, but I don't think it's risen enough for it to justify like continued support. Anyway. Oh, discounts, got it. Yeah, they went like 60% off or something. Yeah. Let's see. Where's the line with flirting with the receptionist? That would help them imagine you working there. Certainly, that would do something. It's like, I think it was a TikTok or something where it was somebody doing like, what are the worst interview questions? And a guy like sits down and it's just like a bunch of friends trying to challenge each other to come up with the worst idea for an interview question. It's okay, do you have any questions for me before we end the interview? And the guy's just like, yeah. It's like, how hard and fast are the rules on like flirting with customers and employees here? It was like, how seriously do you guys take like sexual assault or something? It was like, oh my God, yep, you're not okay, bye. It's like, Jesus, wow. Yeah, what's your policy on like casual use of marijuana in the office? Were you guys like serious about the drug testing, or was that just like a general, like, you gotta say it, you know? Can we wake and bake here? I know you said that I needed to disclose all vacation time, but I'm going to need to take off like 4 months right off the bat. So if you want to just give me the job, I can work with that. Anywho, let's see. Oh yeah, we did. I guess we'll finish with this new segment. We officially got our first look at Liam Hemsworth. I can't even say his name. Liam Hemsworth's Geralt in season 4 of The Witcher. Hunger Games star Liam Hemsworth. I mean, he was in the Hunger Games. Is he a star of the Hunger Game? That seems like a bit of a stretch. Hasn't he done other stuff? And I mean, also, that was over a decade ago. He was in Independence Day, The Dressmaker, Last Song, Land of Bad. I don't know. He hasn't quite had the raucous success of his brother, but still, I mean, it's like over a decade ago. Anyway, we got the first look at him as Geralt. It's just a series of like small walking shots and brooding, and then he turns to the camera with the yellow eyes. Honestly, I feel bad for the guy. I think he could have done a great Geralt, or he probably will do a great Geralt. The problems with the show are not with him. The problem with the show are with like the showrunner, the writers, the fact that they seem to really want to make any show other than The Witcher. And so they have all of these plot lines that have nothing to do with The Witcher that they're just coming up with to pad out gameplay time. Like when I heard, and I think when all of us heard they were doing a Witcher show, we got excited. We got thrilled. It was like, hell yeah. Hell yeah. And then they announced after the first season, which was pretty good, they're like, yeah, and we're going to do like, I think they said 7 seasons or something. We're going to do a lot. And then time goes by, things start to get a little iffy. Season 2 is really weird. Like they just decide to make the entire season about Frangilla. And you're like, okay, but none of this is like in the books. It's all specifically crafted for this show. And then the story goes nowhere. And nobody really cared to begin with. And then you're left like, okay, well, like, what are we doing now? And then like season 3, they also continue to double down on covering any story or plot line other than Geralt. And I think a lot of us were hoping that we just get like more monster fights and you'd follow the books really quickly or closely and all of that. But instead, we've just gotten a game that is, or a show that seems dedicated to rewriting the books and trying to make it about all the women of the story, even women that are not in the original stories hardly at all. And then Geralt is like a side character for it. And it's just really frustrating because they had started so strong. And then they just continued to kind of blow it, you know? Lee, just a heads up, one warning, we don't do all caps in chat because it floods it. So just turn off caps lock. Anyway, but the Witcher writers hated the Witcher IP. Well, yeah, they were saying things like they found the books highly problematic. They found the books to be really sexist, and they wanted to like reclaim the stories in a way. And it just was like, okay, if you didn't like the stories, why did you choose to make a Witcher show? You know, it's like, personally, I hate Lord of the Rings. So I've decided to make a Lord of the Rings TV show, and we're going to reclaim the books. It's like, they were never yours to claim. Well, we're doing it anyways. And it's like, okay, well, don't be surprised when nobody wants watches. And that's basically what's happened. There's also other things that haven't really been confirmed or proven. Like, for example, Henry Cavill left the show, and we all know this. He left the show. The official story is because he was going to go off and play Superman again, and there were going to be scheduling conflicts. So he left the show to do Superman, and then Superman fell through, so he was left without The Witcher and without Superman, and he just left both of them. He's okay. He's doing the Warhammer show with, I think, Amazon, so he's busy doing stuff, but still. That's the official story. What a lot of us think happened is that he was greatly dissatisfied with the writers and with the direction of the Witcher show. He's never going to say this, of course, because like it's all PR, you know, it's all PR stuff. So he's going to be like, I wish them the best. And I think that they're going to do a great job on the future seasons. And, you know, the show's going to be great. I think like Cavill statement on Witcher. Yeah, he announced his departure from the show. He said, quote, "My journey as Geralt of Rivia has been filled with both monsters and adventures, but alas, I will be laying down my medallion and my swords for season 4. In my stead, the fantastic Mr. Liam Hemsworth will be taking up the mantle of the White Wolf. As with the greatest literary characters, I pass the torch with reverence for the time spent embodying Geralt and enthusiasm to see Liam's take on this most fascinating and nuanced of men." So of course it's all smiles and nods and handshakes, and they're all going to play nice. But I think we all heard the rumblings of trouble. There were statements and arguments that Cavill had been butting heads a lot, and so I think because of those rumors and the rumblings that he was not happy with the direction the show was going, there were stories of him just like straight up telling the writers no to certain things they wanted to do, because he's like, no, that wouldn't be something Geralt would do. It's not something that would happen in this universe. It's not something that's in the books. We're not doing that. He would just stand hard and fast and be like, no, we're not doing it. And because he was Henry Cavill, he was playing Geralt, they kind of had to play along with him. But apparently he was driving some of the writers crazy because they wanted to do a lot more wacky stuff that he wasn't a fan of. But you can see that they've shifted stuff. Let's see, writing for The Independent last year, Nick Hilton argued that replacing Henry Cavill as Geralt was a mistake. I agree. They should have just canceled it, honestly. This was, or is not, a minor tweak to the show, but a change to its DNA that would make Dr. Jekyll think twice. Cavill has always been the best thing about The Witcher, a blockbuster that has suffered from charisma-free supporting actors. Charisma-free supporting actors. Oof. We all know who he's talking about. And writing that even ChatGPT would want to take a second pass at. Cavill's performance, though, has always felt right. And I agree with that. The streamer Netflix has also announced a slew of newcomers joining the cast for season 4, including Lawrence Fishburne as fan favorite barber surgeon Regis Charlton Copley, District 9 and Monkey Man as bounty hunter Leo Bonhart, James Purefoy, The Following, and Solomon Kane as Amir's court advisor and spy Skellen, and Danny Woodburn from Watchmen and Mirror as the dwarf Zoltan. I just don't think it's going to be enough. I mean, again, I think in another universe, Liam, if he had been Geralt from the start, could have found some success. But the problem was never with Geralt or the actor portraying Geralt. The problems were always elsewhere. Yeah. Hemsworth will continue to play Geralt in season 5, which will be shot back to back with season 4 and will be the show's final season. Netflix recently confirmed. And again, it doesn't really surprise anybody because we've all had suspicions that the show's numbers are probably tanking. But like even this, you look at some of the promotional footage that they share and you're like, who are these people? Like, it's not even focused on Geralt. The Witcher, who is like the guy that the show is named after. What are we doing? And they're like, why aren't people watching? Like, bro, they started strong, but then the second that they got their foot in the door, they just started going crazy. And for me, I watched season 2 and I had no interest in season 3, certainly because I knew that Henry was going to be leaving after. And he was the only one that really felt like an advocate for people that wanted the show to be true to the source material. And so once he left, it was like, okay, well, now there is no limit on what they're going to try to do. You know? Insert Adam Sandler. You blew it! Yeah. I saw the actress who played Yennefer. She was really great in it. Yeah, Yennefer's actress. She's done a good job with it. I think so. As has the actress who plays Ciri. I think she's done a good job. I think, you know, each of these actors in isolation has done a good job, but there's just so many other layers to it where it's like the actor's only as good as the script, and if the script is falling apart and is just a disaster, there's just not much you can do. Netflix always messes stuff up. They had possible money printer of a series and somehow messed it up so badly. Yeah, remember the first season happened and everybody was like, oh, this is going to be the next Game of Thrones. Netflix has their own Game of Thrones. This is crazy. And they've somehow blown it. They had a potential multi-billion-dollar franchise on their hands that they had exclusive rights to, and they blew it. Blew it. Yeah. I understand maybe changing some things for it to not be the exact same if you want to just go play the game or read the books. But why go off the rails at the point where it changes the whole show's culture? I just think fundamentally they didn't understand why people were watching. Like, people were watching it to see a high production value representation of the books and what a lot of people only had experienced through the games. And they felt that Henry Cavill was an advocate to make sure that that would happen in a respectful way. However, instead of that, what they got was a first season that was like promising because it was on a smaller budget. So like they were working their way up to it. Season 2 got a little bit better with production value and everything, but it also was weirdly focused for like half of the runtime on plot lines that were not in the books and were completely contrived to seemingly just give actors or actresses and characters like Frangilla more screen time. When people are watching a show called The Witcher, people want to see The Witcher. So everybody's just really weirded out why they're doing it. It's like, what? What? I stopped after seeing Geralt's friend turn into a tree monster or something. Yeah, and stuff like that, where it was just like, it was odd. It was really odd. The Nilfgaardian ballsack armor. I will at least, maybe I'll defend them on that. That was a bold design choice. And you know what? It's bold. It's not what I would have chosen to do for their armor, but at least it was different. It was a little interesting. It was an attempt at an interesting thing, but it did look like they were wearing gigantic scrotums as clothing. I will give you that. It did look like that. Yes. The showrunner fundamentally misunderstood the idea behind the story. She saw herself in Yen and thought it was about family, and it just wasn't. Yeah. Bust a Nut just said, you could call the armor ballsy. Yeah, you could. Sure could. But I mean, I agree. I think that there's just a series of misunderstandings, and no matter what, like the way you look at it, the audience has grown disillusioned and disenfranchised from the show. The show's job is to cater to the audience and to give the audience what they want to see. That's the show's job. The show's job is not to do something subversive and blow your mind with some emotional or moral lesson, that everybody hates. The job is to service the customer. That's what you're trying to do. And you can't look at it and argue anything but that they failed that, because they clearly failed it. If they were successful, the show would be successful. So clearly they have failed. So the goal should be to figure out what went wrong. And pretty clearly the audience that was, somebody like me that watched it initially and loved it, and that stopped watching it because it didn't fulfill what I was hoping it would fulfill. They should be coming to people like us and like, okay, well, what is the goal? What did we do wrong? How should we change it? How should we fix it? But instead they've told us that like, oh, if we don't like season 2 or season 3 of The Witcher, then we're just like sexist, or we're just bigots, or we're just this or that. It's like, okay, well, you've just verified that I'm not going to watch your show then. Okay. It was a show called The Witcher, and The Witcher was a background character. So I stopped watching because I wanted to watch The Witcher. And if you don't take that, okay, I can't do much for you. Just play the games. Well, the games are fine. The books are fantastic. I have the books down. I guess they're right there. They're behind the red light right there. But I have the books. The books are great and have some amazing stories in them that aren't explored in the same way in the games. So it's like, I would like to see those stories represented and told. And that's why season 1 was interesting, because they told a lot of those smaller stories that you wouldn't have seen or maybe you heard rumblings of in the games, but instead we just didn't get any of it. Oh yeah, Edge Runners was great. Luke just can't appreciate the brave and stunning and beautiful choices that they made. Yeah. Stunning, brave, and beautiful. Companies need to study the Fallout adaptation, honestly. Good stuff. Or even take existing worlds and tell new stories in these worlds. Yeah, it's just, if you respect the source material and you respect the audience that loves and cherishes those franchises, you can do well. But the moment that you start talking down to the audience and telling them that they are the problem, it's like, well, what we're doing is actually awesome and you just don't like it. So, okay, doesn't matter. If you open an ice cream shop and you put together a brand new gallon of ice cream that you're really proud of, and then the customer comes in and all the customers are like, this tastes like actual diarrhea. This is horrible. And then the ice cream shop owner goes, well, actually, it's really good. And if you don't like it, you just don't know what good food is or good ice cream is. So maybe you shouldn't be taking the ice cream. You shouldn't be surprised when the companies go, or when the customers go, okay, and leave. And then nobody buys your ice cream. Like, of course, if you talk down to your customers, they're going to leave and not give you money. And then you're like, but where did the money go? Where did the customers go? It's because you told them to eat the diarrhea ice cream. Damn it. It's just. But this is why I've said before, like, whether it's the Sweet Baby Inc. stuff or whether it's the Netflix stuff, like whenever activist writing gets involved with games or film or TV or whatever, it generally tanks the quality. Sometimes not. Sometimes it can be done in a way that doesn't really affect the quality. And I see sometimes I can't think of an example, but there probably is one example. But generally, it tanks the quality and the games or shows or movies will flop. So these things usually have a way of working themselves out and leveling out. It's too bad that so much like time and money is wasted, but at least it generally settles, Like with how horrible Forspoken was. Like they really thought that was going to be a badass character that would be on the level of like Ellie or Aloy from Horizon. And they were apparently genuinely shocked when people didn't connect with Forspoken. Like we thought people would really like it. But that's because they were in a bubble, They didn't ask anybody outside of their bubble what the deal was. And that's perhaps most baffling of all. So I wish them the best with the new seasons of The Witcher. I won't really be watching unless I hear wonderful, wonderful things that they've pulled like a 180. But I feel bad for Liam because I think he's going to do probably a very good job. But the problem was never with him or the portrayal of Geralt. The problem was always with the script and the show running and everything else. So, Enigma, Luke, any upcoming games you're excited / hyped about? I know you're usually skeptical, but I like when people talk about things they like. Oh yeah, there's all sorts of games I'm excited for. I usually stay away from the word hype, as you alluded to, just because I think it can be, I don't know. I think hype for most people just means that they start looking past problems because they're excited for it. So I just generally avoid the word. But the games I'm excited for, yeah. I mean, I'm excited for, like whether you look at GTA 6, I think that looks, of course, shockingly stupid good. We're gonna get games like Ghost of Tsushima 2. We're gonna get the Elden Ring DLC. We're gonna get, like, there's just a lot of games. Yeah, no, you're good anyway. I get what you mean. Death Stranding 2 looks like an acid trip. That'll be crazy. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 looks wild. I think I want to see more about the new Fable. I want to see actual gameplay and what that looks like. I think that could be interesting. Assassin's Creed Red, I'm interested in hearing how those seasons and the gameplay will work with that. I want to see actual gameplay, like regular gameplay, not like stage trailer gameplay, but I want to see actual gameplay of something like Star Wars Outlaws. I want to know what Cory Barlog's been working on over at Santa Monica Studio. I want to know whatever the hell that Naughty Dog's been working on for so long. So, like, there's a lot. I'm very optimistic, but you know, nowadays with so many games coming out and just being flops, I'm like, it's best not to get your hopes up for much of anything. Just be safe. Space Marine 2. Yeah, Space Marine 2. Black Myth Wukong. Avowed is going to be interesting. There's a lot. Yeah. It's going to be crazy. Sony Showcase, right? Yeah, probably soon. I don't know. I don't think they've confirmed anything, but soon-ish. There should be something. So, anyway, everybody, I'm going to go eat. I'm realizing now I did not have breakfast, so I'm a hungry boy. It's just how it is. Let me catch up on these. Loop, thank you for subbing with Prime. Thank you, my friend. Michael, thank you for the 2. Do you think Ninja Theory is cooked? I don't know. Apparently there are other projects that's been greenlit, but nowadays I don't think anybody is safe. I think the game is polarizing enough that they probably will be fine, but and the other thing is that Microsoft just spent like $185 or something million on that studio, so I don't think that they are gonna shutter them. The difference with Tango is that Tango was part of a bigger deal for ZeniMax. I don't think Tango was ever like their goal when they acquired ZeniMax. I think they were just like, oh, we also get them. Okay, cool, whatever. Let's see, Lucas, thank you for the super chat. You say you're about adjusting expectations, but you get disappointed when it doesn't meet the adjusted expectations. For being anti-hype, you get a disappointed as hyped people. You get as disappointed as hyped people. No, so there are certain standards. I think you're referring to Hellblade 2. For Hellblade 2, like the expectation for any sequel is that the sequel will be better than the predecessor. I think that is the assumption that is effectively it's like a standard. It's a heuristic. It's something that you should always be able to go with. Like if there's a 2, it should be better than the 1, especially when 7 years have passed. And other than graphics, there is not like a single thing that Hellblade 2 does better than the original, in my opinion. So does that mean I was hyped for Hellblade 2? No, it just means that I expected the literal bare minimum and they didn't meet the bare minimum. So am I as disappointed as hyped people? I don't know. I don't know how people who were super hyped responded to Hellblade 2, but my problem was specifically that I thought that Hellblade 2 did not meet the most bare minimum of standards. Animations are better, graphics are better and stuff. Presentation is better. But in terms of what actually makes a video game, every part of it is worse as far as I can tell. Yeah. There are hype expectations and then normal expectations. Yeah, and I feel like even with normal expectations for Hellblade 2, it doesn't quite meet that. Yeah. Let's see, Banana. Hellblade 1 is my favorite game of all time. I thought the combat in 2 was one step forward and one step back, but the story was just as good in my opinion. Did you think the ending was also like ridiculous, Banana? Because I felt like the ending, they're building it up for like this big, dare I say, giant finale, and then it just doesn't happen. And I was like, what? I thought the game was broken. I thought I had accidentally triggered a false ending. So what is happening? Are you going to try X Defiant? Yeah, if I can get into a server, I'll try it. I heard they were having tons of server issues, but we'll see. The ending wasn't as good, but I still like it. Yeah, that ending to the first game, though. That ending, I still think about that ending. It was so good. There's like a little gimmick or hook at the end of the first game during the final encounter that is so clever and so awesome. I just love it. It's so good. Yeah, I did hear Creative Assembly is trying a Star Wars game. I don't know. I don't trust Creative Assembly a lot with much. but we'll see. I mean, we'll see. I would not put a lot of weight on that, honestly. I mean, yeah, they put some stuff on sale, like the Pharaoh game, and they've tried to do some stuff, but like, I just, again, I would not trust them with much of anything. So anyway, thank you everybody for hanging out with me. I love you all dearly. What a crazy Wednesday stream out of all of them. We got frickin' like 1,000 people concurrent at one point. That's wild. So appreciate every single one of you. Thank you to everybody who sent in super chats and re-up memberships and subs and everything. You guys are great. Much love. Appreciate the gosh darn heck out of you. And we'll be back with another video very, very soon. So much love. I'll see you in the next one. Hugs and kisses. Bye-bye.